The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year. Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and yes, our guy Casey McAllister in the producer chair. Let me get more centered. Maybe I should have checked that before we started the old live show. But we're off and rolling today. Happy Tuesday, everybody. And Casey, good morning. How are we today?
Good, doing good. Watched some football yesterday. That was horrific for all Vikings fans. I'd like to kind of like adopt the Vikings as my second or third team I like to watch in the NFL, especially the Sam Darnold story this season. And it just eviscerated. I mean, his whole entire season just became null and void after that game, which sucks because, I mean, the dude was under duress the entire game. But, man, I feel for my Vikings fans. That was a horrible game to watch.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, you want to feel good for them. Like, hey, you weren't even supposed to be here. You had a win total, I think, coming in of about 5 wins. You drafted a rookie quarterback. Like, you know, you lose your quarterback right before the season starts, and you actually had an amazing regular season. It just sucks you went out that way. But, yeah, so I'm the opposite. I actually don't feel bad for Vikings fans. Like, it was a great year. Like, we're not supposed to have any success. You had some success, but I know what you're saying. To see a quarterback play at that level. We were talking before the show. I've never seen a quarterback just go from average to elite. Well, he came crashing down, Sam Darnold, of course, over the last couple of weeks. But
yeah,
guys, good morning.
I'm going to be really mad at Vikings fans and players and the whole team if that blowout loss last night leads the NFL to change their playoff format. I've seen some bubblings that they might do away with the division champions as the top 4 seeds and just have, you know, automatic bids to the playoffs and then seed based on record. And then we just turn into the NBA where divisions mean absolutely nothing. And divisional rivalries and regional football makes the NFL so great. So if that blowout last night leads to that at all, then I definitely won't feel bad for Vikings fans.
Yeah, and this is where I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. The Vikings, though, had a lot of success this season. I mean, Sam Darnold was a fraud, and we all knew Sam Darnold was a fraud. I think Jacob was a little bit wrong on it because I think he was taking victory laps that he wasn't a fraud.
I think they went 14-3.
He is a fraud. He's a fraudulent quarterback, and that's okay. Like it's okay to have a good little run. He had a good little run, and now his career is back to.
They only lost to 2 teams this year.
It's true. That's true. I just think if you were a Vikings fan, I think you knew what was going to happen. You saw what happened against the Lions, and you knew what was going to happen last night. It might have been hard for you to see, but you knew it was going to happen. I mean, yeah, we'll get into it, but he took 9 sacks yesterday, and it felt like it was still all his fault. And you know, every turnover he had, it was ugly. It was ugly, and he wasn't a good quarterback. So.
Yeah, look, coming in, they had the win total of 5. They had no expectations. And I think it's easy to come in. If you play well, it's great. If you play poorly, you're supposed to. And I think we saw him play great all season until the final couple weeks when all of a sudden it was pressure time. And it's like the difference between the elite quarterbacks and the good to average to bad quarterbacks is who handles that pressure. What makes Joe Burrow great is when the lights get the brightest, that's when he has his – I don't think we've ever questioned Joe Burrow once since arriving in the NFL. But, man, it was a big pressure moment. The primetime, remember the primetime debacles. All of those have been eliminated. We don't even talk about the Bengals' struggles in primetime anymore. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, all the great quarterbacks. I mean, even C.J. Stroud, who has regressed this year, give him credit. He's 2 playoff wins and already in year number 2. Sam Darnold, it's like the second that pressure, we're 14-2 and we have to win this game to win the division and get a first-round bye in the playoffs, and you have your worst game as a Viking, and then you follow it up with your second worst game as a Viking in the playoffs when you had to win to advance. Yeah, I think the biggest difference between the elite level quarterbacks and the average to good to bad is those who can handle pressure. And I think we saw Sam Darnold, the pressure, that's definitely the difference between weeks 1 through 15 and then 16, 17 in the wild card round of the playoffs.
Yeah, he was holding the ball like crazy last night. I mean, completely reverted not just to bad quarterback play, but to Sam Darnold. Bad quarterback play, seeing ghosts, mononucleosis type stuff. And it was terrible. It probably cost him $10, $15 million.
Yeah. I was going to, we're going to have Fitz on. I was going to ask him, how much money he lost because it doesn't seem like you'd want that guy to be your starting quarterback.
How could you? He played 2 playoff games and put up 2 stinkers.
2 absolute stinkers. I mean, we were talking about selling JJ for a 3rd-round draft pick, and now it's like, okay, well, we might need him now. So good for the Vikings, though. They had a good year. Nobody expected them to have the year that they had. Overperformed expectation. I think that was the story of these playoffs have been just a bunch of teams that overperformed their expectations, and when they had to go up against good teams, they lost.
The 2025 quarterback franchise tag is $41 million. How much is too much for Sam Darnold?
Oh, boy.
We're going to find out.
I guess.
And teams will be desperate enough. Even if we are going to promise you he will not help you in the playoffs, but he'll get you weeks 1 through 15, there'll still be a lot of there'll be a lot of coaches. Save my job.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Unless you're Mike McCarthy.
Out of the teams that overperformed expectations, so we'll give the Vikings, the Steelers, the Broncos. Anybody else in that?
Did you say Chargers? Who'd you say?
Chargers is a good one. Out of those 4, how would you rank them right now in terms of the future of their franchise?
I mean, I know a lot of people are going to be sour on Herbert after a 4 interception
I'm
game,
going to say the Chargers too.
I think with Harbaugh and the pieces that they do have, I think it's pretty distantly the Chargers. After that, I think you have to go Broncos just because you haven't seen JJ yet.
They
and
got a
it
young
comes down
roster.
to which rookie quarterback's better.
Yep. Young roster. I think the Broncos, and they have a really good head coach. So
yeah.
I think the Broncos would be there too. And then it's between the Vikings and the Steelers, and I think the Steelers have the worst future.
What was that?
Was that a bird that just
It was
flew
a
into the
bird.
window?
Yeah, it was definitely a bird.
Bird just flew into the window.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Or
Are those its feathers?
It might have been.
did it explode?
That's nuts.
That's
Yeah,
why we don't.
that's
It did.
nuts.
You could see the feather.
Those are its feathers.
That's nuts. Oh my gosh.
No.
It still
It
flew.
hit that window really hard.
That was Randy Johnson, dude. Like, what the hell happened?
no.
Oh my.
ADD.
Well,
I think the Steelers have the worst. I think they have the worst. All the question marks because they just refuse to. And I hate urging teams to lose. I hate incentivizing losing, but they refuse to blow the roster up and try to rebuild. They will milk every talent that's left for everything that they're worth, and they will not trade them to get better.
guys, hand up. We missed a big one, and the clear number 1.
That's made the playoffs.
The Commanders.
And the Commanders.
I think their win total was like 5.5.
Yeah.
The way Jaden's playing this year, I think if I'm buying stock in any team right now, it might be the Washington Commanders.
What do you think the difference is between the Commanders this year and the Texans from last year?
Not much.
So
not
next
a
year,
whole
will you be
lot.
as – because everything I'm hearing, I hear the T. Higgins to Washington. I heard it all morning yesterday on all the ESPN national shows about, look at Washington. They're going to be a problem for a while. I could see Washington, just the way I labeled them as the Texans of this year coming into the year. They could be this year's Texans of next year. Where, by the way, if you regress, win 10 games, win your division, and win a playoff game, I'm all about regression, baby.
Yeah.
More power to you.
I think you're definitely right. My concern with Washington probably doesn't come next year unless Cliff Kingsbury gets hired as a head coach. I think that's when my concern will really come in for Jaden and that Washington team as a whole is when they lose Cliff Kingsbury. Because Dan Quinn's a great head coach in terms of winning in the regular season. He's got to a Super Bowl in Atlanta, didn't quite get the job done, but he's a really, really good coach. And he's going to be able to have that defense playing at a high level his entire tenure, but without an offensive mind, or an elite offensive mind, I should say, on the offensive side of the football. I'm a little bit worried about that team with a defensive head coach, but we'll see. As long as they have Cliff, I'm going to be pretty high on that.
I was just going to say, I think that the Commanders, I think they're good. But heading into next year, I will say, because you saw it with the Texans a little bit this year, how they took a step back. I think the Commanders are playing so well right now that their only step is backwards heading into next season. We'll see if I'm wrong on that. I just don't think that, and I think Jaden Daniels is very good. But we'll see if the rest of the roster continues to play as well as it did this season.
I think something they have going for them as well is the Giants, presumably not going to be very good
Giants
next
are
year.
terrible.
We don't
Cowboys
know how
would be
the
great.
Cowboys are going to bounce back. Yeah, with Dak's injury and everything else there, we don't know how the Cowboys are going to bounce back. Obviously, the Eagles are contenders, but, I mean, you could potentially have 3-4 wins right there in your division, which is what allowed the Texans to stay afloat this year, and the AFC South being so bad.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to push headlines. It's a little bit later in the show because we're
Sure.
just a few minutes out from Jason Fitz hopping on with us again. We're going to talk college football playoffs, or not playoffs are a thing of the past. It's all about the national championship game now. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame, Ryan Day, Ohio State in the national championship game. Which coach, Ryan Day or Marcus Freeman? And I'll ask you guys this before because this will be the first thing I ask Jason when we bring him on. Which coach does a national championship help the most in regards to their legacy moving forward? Like, obviously, both coaches need one. There's arguments to be made for both. But when you look at both head coaches right now, which head coach do you think needs this national championship more?
I'm gonna say that Marcus Freeman needs it more. I don't think Ryan Day has to prove anything to Ohio State. I don't think he has anything left to prove. He's an elite head coach. It's going to be, obviously, winning a championship goes a long way for the fan base not hating his guts. But I don't think I don't think there's a Division I program out there that's looking at this game and saying Ryan Day better win this or he's a fraudulent coach. Like, that's not. I think Marcus Freeman needs it just so he can be established as one of the greats in college football. We know what Ryan Day is. Ryan Day is a damn good football coach. Whether or not he wins this championship, to me, is irrelevant in terms of his legacy. Obviously, he would like to win it. It would certainly go a long way for him personally. I just don't think anybody talks down on him after this game regardless, unless it's an Ohio State fan.
That's fair. I think it's pretty clearly Ryan Day just because of where he ranks in the coaching ranks right now and how few coaches have won a national championship that are active in college football. I think this puts him in a pretty elite group. And Freeman is still very young. I mean, Day is too, but he's been established in that group of debatably one of the best coaches in college football for a while now. And I think Freeman still has plenty of time. If he loses this one, he's gotten to a championship. And, I think it's stepping stones for that Notre Dame program. But I think he certainly has time before any kind of fraud calls come in on his name. Ryan Day, on the other hand, if you miss every opportunity to win a championship with this roster and this team, I think it's a pretty big indictment on you as a coach.
I want to say Ryan Day. I do. I agree with a lot of what Elliot has said, mainly because right now, if you're Marcus Freeman, you're in the national championship game for the first time, and I know you coach Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a big brand, but are they a college football powerhouse? In all seriousness, are they a college football powerhouse? I think they're fringe. I think they're right there, right? But I don't think they bring in the talent that we see consistently enough that some of the bigger programs do. Now, I look at a coach like Sonny Dykes who led TCU to the national championship game 2 years ago. I look at DeBoer who leads Washington to the national championship game, and now we're questioning whether he was the right fit, right name to replace Nick Saban at Alabama. If you're Marcus Freeman and you are now in the national championship game and you lose this national championship game, you risk being Sonny Dykes. You risk being, of course, DeBoer. You risk being those head coaches who, great. You lead your team to a national championship game, you lose, but there's not a lot of faith that you're going to be able to do it again and bring it back. Ryan Day is one of those, I think, that even with all the question marks and the fan base that just piles on him, I think there's still confidence that if they lose this game to Notre Dame, that Ryan Day is still going to be able to lead this team back into national title contention moving forward. That's why I want to lean more towards, I think it's more important for Marcus Freeman, because also keep in mind, the format to the playoff is going to change most likely moving forward. I did hear and read yesterday that we're probably going to keep this same format from this year for one more year, and then we'll see some change. I think it was on the Dan Patrick show that they were talking about this, that what they're hearing is that 2026 would be the first that we see some changes be made. And if that's the case, I don't think Notre Dame catches as many breaks throughout. Now, they still ran into Georgia and others. It's not like they got the Penn State path to the through the playoff or whatever. But at the same time, it's like Notre Dame, this is your shot. You Marcus Freeman, you beat Ohio State. You beat this powerhouse Buckeye team. You're instantly a legend in college football right now if you're able to pull that off. If you lose it, no one's going to forget about you. You've still done a great job. I'm just not confident. I'm more confident in Ryan Day's ability to lead the Buckeyes back to this point than I am Marcus Freeman to get back to this point, I guess.
I would agree. I would certainly agree with that, and it doesn't really have anything to do with either coach, in my opinion, but just the ability to get talent into your school.
Yeah.
Notre Dame always has been fighting an uphill battle. Freeman's done a great job, better than Brian Kelly certainly did at Notre Dame in terms of getting high-end talent to South Bend, but that's still a little bit of a struggle when it comes to everywhere else in the country, the other top-tier programs in the country. You're fighting a different battle with the academic standards and, the religious aspect and all that stuff. It's a different beast to recruit blue-chip talent to Notre Dame, and Freeman's done a great job, but it still certainly gives Ohio State and, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, all those other blue-chip schools, gives them a leg up in terms of the ability to get back. I think we've seen that the last 2 years with Notre Dame having to go to the portal to get their starting quarterback. Not that Ohio State didn't. They have a portal quarterback right now. But I just, 1 year rentals at quarterback back-to-back years. That just kind of shows you the direction of that program and how hard it is to get that blue chip talent in there. I mean, they had a kid named Deuce Knight who was a 5-star recruit who was committed to Notre Dame for a long time, flipped to Auburn earlier this year. He was one of the best quarterback recruits that they would have ever had, if not the best. So it's still a struggle no matter how good they are to get elite talent to South Bend, and that's why I would have a little bit of concern about Freeman getting back. But I think he's an elite coach, one of the best in the entire sport, right up there with the Days and the Kirby Smarts of college football, and I don't think he needs to win a championship to prove that.
All right, so Jason Fitz is going to join us coming up here in 15 minutes. So for everyone that is clamoring for the headlines, read by the beautiful voice of our guy.
That's what I heard. A lot of people love these headlines.
So we're going to get to headlines with Elliot coming up. He's going to get us caught up.
The biggest time filler of all time.
It's not time filler. Usually is in the opening segment. Yeah. These are usually all the stuff that we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on throughout. But nonetheless, we'll get to headlines coming up. Jason Fitz coming up around the corner. NFL playoff talk more so in depth. And then we'll talk about, again, last night, again, Chatterbox Sports put out a graphic of the top 10 targets that you could potentially see the Cincinnati Bengals look at when it comes to the draft coming up in a few months. We'll get to all of that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. The Reds announced yesterday they're going to reverse back to the original plan for their TV deal, and I know a lot of people were weighing in on that. We're going to get some more of that coming up in a bit because I think a lot of people had questions, including me. I know we just instantly reacted to it. We didn't really know a whole lot of the details. Craig Sandlin and Kirby did a good job putting out a piece yesterday. If you haven't seen it, go to Chatterbox Sports YouTube channel and go watch that. About a 10-minute clip. They did a good job of breaking down a lot of what to expect with that and weighing in on, okay, hey, does this mean there's going to be money spent now? There's money now that there's more money coming into the Reds. Does that mean they're going to start spending money now heading into the 25 season? We'll get to more of that coming up here in a bit as well. But Jason Fitz, college football, NFL, he'll join us in just a few moments. But let's send it to our guy Elliot for Elliot's headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
Headlines. Not a ton yesterday. College basketball, couple Power 5 games. Notre Dame, they beat Boston College 78-60. Maryland, they took down Minnesota 77-71. UCLA, they dropped another game, this time to Rutgers 75-68. NFL, we already talked about it, but 27-9 the final score. Sam Darnold 25 of 40, 245 and a touchdown with a pick and a fumble, sacked 9 times as well. Stafford 19 of 27, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, didn't really need to throw in the second half. Kyron 16 of 76, added a receiving touchdown as well there. The playoffs schedule is here. It's Texans versus Chiefs Saturday 4:30, Commanders versus Lions Saturday at 8 p.m., Rams versus Eagles Sunday at 3, and Ravens versus Bills Sunday at 6. I don't like the playoff schedule on Sunday anymore. I don't like when it switches from 3 to 6. I would rather it just be 4 to 8. If it's 4 and 8, I like it. If it's 3 and 6, I don't like it very much. Because once that game ends, I'm sad. But nonetheless, it'll be a very, very good game on Sunday. This will be probably the best football weekend of the entire year, given the fact that there's also a championship game following Sunday, which would be pretty incredible as well.
What is your favorite football weekend of the year? Are you a divisional round guy or are you conference championship?
Usually I'm a wild card guy.
Really?
I'm usually the wild card guy, but these games were just so terrible. I guess I'm going to have to start switching to divisional, though. I guess maybe that would give me a better chance at seeing better football.
I'm usually a divisional guy. You weed out the teams that don't belong, especially with the 7th seed. Usually when you got the 2 byes, wild card wasn't as great anyway.
Yeah.
And I think when you added that 7th seed, a lot of people got really in on wild card weekend. But, I mean, how many times have those teams belonged? I mean, the Packers won last year, but let's be real. That was a Mike McCarthy choke job.
That was. Other NFL news. Deion Sanders talked to Jerry about a potential job with the Dallas Cowboys. Very intriguing, he says. Very, very intriguing. We'll see if that works.
Some fun nuggets about that job opening. Bill Belichick was interested in the
Really?
Cowboys opening, but it was not indicated to him that it would be open this offseason before he took the North Carolina job. And also because the Cowboys waited until yesterday to fire Mike McCarthy, they missed the window to interview any coordinators on teams with a bye. So no interviews for Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Matt Nagy, or Steve Spagnuolo, who had interviews elsewhere. So Jerry Jones just going into this head coaching search with one arm tied behind his back.
What a clown. What an absolute clown he is.
I think Dion to the Cowboys creates that's not just that's the Cowboys' next head coach and off you go. There is a ripple effect that goes into effect. That's why I'm really wanting Dion to Dallas, just because the chaos that will ensue after. I think that if he's the coach of Dallas and he's made it be known that he wants to coach his sons in the NFL, Dallas is not picking at the top of the draft. It's not as simple like, hey, they need to trade up quite a few picks to be able to pull that off. They were not very good last year, obviously, but then there's the Raiders who are sitting there. There's obviously the Browns have that 2 pick. The Titans sit at 1. Could they dangle that pick out there, to try to move up to get Shedeur? I don't know. Maybe they bully teams. I think we talked about it earlier this week or last week. Maybe they bully teams. If Sanders goes to Dallas, maybe they do what LeBron and his camp did, where they put out, Shedeur puts out something that says the only team he will play for is the Dallas Cowboys, and that scares off the teams. And maybe they don't even have to trade. Maybe the Cowboys don't have to trade anything. Maybe Shedeur and his camp come out and says, I refuse to play for anyone except the Dallas Cowboys, so if you draft me, I will not sign, and throw that kind of tantrum and see if it works. It worked, and I'm not comparing Bronny to Shedeur because Shedeur can actually play, but I do see a similar path if that's the case, because I don't think he's going to Dallas to not coach his kids, or going to the NFL, I should say, to not coach Shedeur if he has the opportunity.
He can play, and he's going to be a fine quarterback in the league, but I don't think dealing with all that noise is worth it if I was a team looking for a franchise quarterback like the Cleveland Browns are. Mm-hmm. That would scare me off. Because I don't think he's a generational talent. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he'll be fine. You
can argue Cleveland, as dumb as this sounds. We don't need to argue like yesterday. You can make an argument with Kevin Stefanski as the head coach that Cleveland is honestly probably the best spot to go to for those teams picking at the top. I do like, obviously, Callahan right there with the Titans if they choose to go that route, but a young offensive-minded coach. But Stefanski's had success with every single QB except for the most expensive one that he's been given.
Who's that one?
I don't remember his name. I don't remember it. We've rarely talked about it. But honestly, if
it is impressive to tear that Achilles twice, though. Jeez. It is impressive.
You have to try.
You do.
And I hope it was done against doctor's orders as far as what led to it, because that allows the Browns to get out of a lot of guarantees. But no, I in all seriousness, going to Dallas just to play for your dad, I don't think is the best path to him succeeding in the NFL. I really don't think that that's going to be the case. Now, having CeeDee Lamb to throw the football to would be nice if you're Shedeur. But I think playing for Kevin Stefanski, who has literally had success with every quarterback except for Deshaun, like quarterbacks that can actually play, by the way, because obviously DTR and others, they're just not good. I don't think any coach out there can get some out of. You can make an argument Stefanski is actually a better fit for Shedeur than his dad in Dallas, but that's not going to be an argument I'll win with many people.
If you remove the logos, I don't think this is rocket science here. Kevin Stefanski's won 2 Coach of the Years. He's one of the best offensive coaches in, I think, all of football. I think we've all talked about that it's not his fault the way things have transpired in Cleveland. He's been forced to play a guy that I think everyone knows isn't very good anymore. And he's, obviously kept the job because other people have recognized that as well. So, yeah, I think he'd be a fine landing spot for any of these young quarterbacks.
NBA news from yesterday. Again, not a ton. This is the part of headline season where there's not a lot of headlines. NBA, the Pistons, they beat the Knicks 124-119. They have a winning record on the season. For what it's worth. They were 8.5-point underdogs yesterday. Won the game outright against the Knicks. Warriors, they've lost 4 of their last 5 after a loss to the Raptors, who have 9 wins on their season. The Spurs, they blew out the Lakers yesterday, 126-102. Lakers, that season's not going probably the way that Redick thought it would, huh? Not a lot of.
How far out are we from him getting talked about as hot seat and bad coach and start getting a little ugly?
The issue with Redick is that he makes it in his press conferences. He says a lot of good words and he makes it all about himself. So we'll see how long that can go in LA without wins, but. It's not looking good.
They're still in the play-in.
Well, of course. You would have to be 35 games below 500.
Well, the 76ers are not in the play-in.
Really?
They fell out of the play-in.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about LiAngelo Ball, by the way?
Swerve bend that corner. Whoa.
Say what you want about this Ball family, but they're all like really successful. We could all say he just signed a $13 million record deal with Def Jam Records. How about that? The guy,
That's
like,
insane.
I think that's pretty neat.
Money's crazy, man. Major League Baseball news. The Reds. Bubba Thompson is joining the South Alabama football program as a walk-on.
4 years of eligibility.
So
Repeat that. Wait, what?
Just so we're clear.
The center fielder for the Reds.
The Reds had a
yes,
guy
sorry.
play 17 games for our team last season. 17 games. He will now be leaving professional baseball, and he will be joining South Alabama
USA.
as perhaps a quarterback. I don't know what position. He played quarterback before. I don't know if he'd be a quarterback again. South Alabama as a walk-on.
Bubba Thompson, South Alabama jersey in the mail under 48 hours.
Is he going to split time? Is this like a Bo Jackson type thing? Like,
No,
is
I
he
believe unfortunately he's come to the realization that baseball is no more.
The 100
Oh.
games in Chattanooga didn't tell him that?
Yeah.
So he's not like the next Dion, the next Bo Jackson.
There was a lot. I mean,
He's the first Bubba
I
Thompson.
remember. I'm not going to go on a victory. I'm not going to go on a victory lap here, but I remember a lot of people telling me how Bubba Thompson was a solid baseball player last
World
year.
Series champion.
And I mean, he doesn't play the sport anymore. So.
Anyone that's named Bubba, I instantly pull for.
I'm cheering for Bubba Thompson. I am cheering for Bubba
I
Thompson.
don't think you
to be
are.
the best quarterback that's ever played, or whatever position he will be playing for South Alabama. But I mean, come on,
And there you go.
those are your headlines.
We talked about Mike Tomlin yesterday. I keep seeing radio hosts from Pittsburgh that keep putting out how the Jets need to, or radio hosts, when it comes to the Jets, putting stuff out there in regards to, hey, they need to trade a first-round pick to go get Mike Tomlin. That the Jets, the answer to all their problems is to go get Mike Tomlin and to give up a first-rounder to do that. So what doesn't make sense at all is Mike Tomlin has failed to be able to take Pittsburgh to that next level because they don't have a quarterback. But Jets media and Jets hosts and fans want the Jets to give up a first-rounder to go get a coach so that he can coach basically the same situation. Now, obviously, I think the Jets is more of a joke of an organization. I still think Pittsburgh's a solid organization. I don't think they're as great as what people make them out to be because of their stubbornness. But I think it's absolutely insane that is there any team out there? Let me ask you this. You guys with Zach Taylor, a lot of weird feelings when it comes to him. Is there any team out there that you think should look at Mike Tomlin and say he is worth a first-rounder? I can't think of one.
No, I would agree. I would agree. And if you're Mike Tomlin, why would you waive your no-trade clause to get traded to a team and then coach them with less draft capital? I would just, if you're going to leave Pittsburgh,
yeah,
why
it makes
wouldn't you
no
just
sense.
say, I'm out. I'm going to pick where I'm going to go.
It would make no sense for him not to do the no. The no trade clause is in there. He's not.
The
gonna
no-trade clause is hilarious.
It's very, very.
A head
funny.
coach having a no-trade clause
very
is
funny.
maybe this is more common than we know,
I mean,
but it seems pretty fun.
Is there an obvious one that we're missing? What's the last
Sean
time?
Payton, I think, was traded.
Sean Payton was traded.
No, that was because of the drama and stuff, and that was just a straight-up
No,
trade.
He retired, and he was still under contract, so the Broncos had to trade for him.
So the only reason I'll push back on that, I almost don't count that just because
Okay.
he wanted to come out of retirement to coach, and that needed to happen. But when's the last time, like, all right, I just coached, we just wrapped up the season, and now they're shipping me off to somewhere to, I don't know, when's just like a little off-season trade, coaching one season into the next somewhere else, like
Bill was traded, wasn't he?
Belichick with the
I
Browns.
think so. Bill Belichick was traded to the Patriots in 2000.
So it's like one of those things where it doesn't happen often,
No,
No.
yeah, no, not at all.
and for it to be a legitimate possibility, like
In 2002, the Buccaneers traded for John Gruden. Two
Okay.
first-round picks, 2 second-round picks.
fair, really. By the way, you think Gruden
To the
coaches
Raiders.
next year?
Next year, no.
Are you following him with?
Relatively soon, yes.
I find him beyond entertaining.
I adore Gruden.
I don't get what he's doing over there, but like it's
Got me
working.
feeling nice.
It's All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kenner, Elliott Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister in the producer chair. We're going to hang out with our guy Jason Fitz with Yahoo Sports. We'll talk college football, NFL, and more. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We're live here in the Chatterbox studios. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, and we are off and rolling here on a Tuesday. The national championship matchup is officially set. Notre Dame took care of business against Penn State to set up their championship showdown with the Buckeyes, who took care of Texas this past Friday night. And now you have Marcus Freeman, a former Buckeye, leading the Fighting Irish, going up against his former team, Ohio State, the second national championship appearance under head coach Ryan Day, and both head coaches looking to win their first ever national championship, and that's what's going to go down next Monday night. Joining us now from Yahoo Sports, the one, the only, Mr. Jason Fitz, friend of the program. Jason, how are you, my friend? Welcome.
I'm good, brother. How are you? This is exciting time for Ohio State, for Notre Dame. Both. I just love the fact that we got a Final Four that was different than the four would have been if we had only had a 14 playoff. It was different than the PCS. We get a championship game that we saw one team with the most inexcusable loss in all of college football. We see another team with a loss to their rival that will never make sense, and it didn't eliminate any of them from national championship consideration. This is a huge win for college football because I think we got it right. The best two teams right now are playing for the national championship.
Yeah, when we talk about coaching, so many people make it about the X's and O's, and I think a lot of these coaches, we know they can coach. They know way more football than I'll ever pretend to know. But when I talk about the coaching job that Ryan Day has done and Marcus Freeman have done, you go back to that Northern Illinois loss, how Marcus Freeman looked at that locker room and got them to buy back in to still have that confidence and belief that they can make a run to this national championship game, I think is beyond impressive. Same thing with Ryan Day. I keep going back to that Michigan loss and just the visual of him walking around the field aimlessly with the bags under his eyes and just looking like a zombie. I don't get how that guy found it within him and his coaching staff to go back into that locker room, look every one of those players in the eye and say, all right, let's go win a national championship. I think the coaching job that they have done from that perspective of both these coaches being leaders in that locker room and getting those guys to still buy in and believe and follow them, I think that's what's been most impressive. That's what I'm most impressed with both of these coaches as they lead their teams into the showdown next Monday night.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you describe Notre Dame and Ohio State as teams right now, part of what we have to talk about is the focus that they're both playing with. So many teams have really shot themselves in the foot repeatedly throughout the course of the playoff. And you can make the argument in the last game, Ohio State kept that game closer than they would have liked to with some stupid penalties. They'll clean that up. But the fact is, these are two teams that have played with confidence and focus throughout the entire college football playoff, which we can't say about the Texases, the Oregons. I mean, it really has been stunning to watch Ohio State come out and just it's like watching Mike Tyson in his prime come out, and you got to survive the first 30 seconds of a fight. Well, I mean, I'd make the argument that it was Ohio State that defeated Ohio State in the first quarter of that game against Texas. They should have been up 21-0. So, for Notre Dame, this is going to be one of those things. I keep making this analogy, take the end of the movie out. I think what we've seen is that Notre Dame is less Rudy and more Rocky. They just get punched and keep getting up, and you don't know how they do it, right? Well, they're going to have to survive just a barrage of absolute explosiveness in the first quarter of this game and then try and settle it into just a heavyweight fight. So it'll be interesting to me to see if they can handle the first 15 minutes of football.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, very generic question, but we just discussed this earlier to start the show. Obviously, both coaches have yet to win a national championship. This is the second national championship appearance for Ryan Day with Ohio State, the first for Marcus Freeman. But both coaches need it. They need it for their resumes, no doubt about it. But which coach do you think, from a legacy standpoint, that this matchup is the most important for? Which coach needs to walk away with the national championship next Monday night in regards to how urgent it is for their legacy moving forward?
Ryan Day. And it's not even close. I mean, Freeman, it's been amazing. And maybe because he's just such an engaging personality. Maybe it's just because he's just so dang good looking. I don't know. But we're all rooting for Notre Dame. Not we all, but it feels like the collective world has suddenly turned around and become Notre Dame fans, which is the opposite of what most of us know for Notre Dame. And the perception that, how many football minds have said you can't put Notre Dame in the college football playoff because all they do is get blown out. Well, that narrative has certainly changed. If you want to talk about narratives, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have changed all of them this year. And so, even though they have that inexcusable loss we've talked about, it's still a team that has really flipped in the perception, in the way we view Marcus Freeman and the way we view Notre Dame. There's just, at this point, he's playing with house money. The same cannot be said for Ryan Day, because even though I think it's the dumbest thing in the world, there are still Ohio State fans that are sitting here saying, well, he didn't beat Michigan. Even if Ohio State wins the Natty, it'll be, well, you still didn't beat Michigan. Again, I understand this is where everybody tweets me and says you don't understand the rivalry. I do. I understand it. I just think it's antiquated thinking in modern college football. Like, go win a national championship. Don't go beat your rival. We don't vote on these things anymore. Just go win a national championship. Worry about that way more. But that being said, if Ryan Day gets thumped in the national championship game, it'll be, hey, didn't even win the championship and he didn't beat Michigan. So, yeah, there's way more pressure on Ryan Day and Ohio State in this game.
I was part of that lunatic fringe, as Kirk Herbstreit called it, after the Michigan loss that was banging the table for Ryan Day to be kicked out of Columbus. But now, obviously, after the last 3 games, that has died down significantly. Do you think he needs this championship to have that go away for good without the Michigan win? Or is it just a cherry on top to kind of, let the road go a little bit longer?
Let me say this, and I worked with Herbie. I was out on game day for a year. When Herbie calls it the lunatic fringe, I don't agree with that. I think what we have to do is recalibrate the expectations of fan bases, and that's impossible to do. Like, look, I lived in the South for 20 plus years, and the first time I ever watched a Tennessee football game, it happened to be Tennessee taking on Alabama. I didn't know that. I walked into a bar wearing a red T-shirt because I happened to have a red T-shirt on. I made it 1 foot in that bar, had a beer thrown on me, and someone tried to punch me, literally. So that was my first experience around college football rivalry to that level, and that was in the Peyton Manning era. I understand why there's so much passion around beating Michigan. I think to the answer of, does Ryan Day need this? What Ryan Day needs to get everybody to calm down, all Ohio State fans, is to beat Michigan. This isn't going to change that. I just think that we have to understand, as I say repeatedly, and this is no offense to incredible fans that love their program. I just think we have to remember they don't make commemorative Sports Illustrated for beating Michigan. They do for winning a national championship. You're not going to fill your basement with swag that says we beat Michigan. You are going to fill your basement with swag that says we won the national championship. So I would love to see this quiet that, but let's be real. At the end of the day, next year, when we go into the game, it's going to be, even as a champion, they couldn't beat Michigan. So I think the only thing that really quells that is going in and stomping Michigan, which they should have done this year. All of that. But I think what we've seen is a really tremendous job coaching since that Michigan game. And if we're going to fault Michigan and everything that happened there, let's start to credit Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, for the job that they've done, finding the right offensive line combination, moving the pocket around, which I think has been a huge part of this. I think there's been some really quality coaching moves since then that need to be acknowledged, even through the hurt that fans still feel about losing to Michigan.
This team looks like a completely different animal since that Michigan loss. Something clearly changed after that game. What do you think it was? Is it a marriage of Chip Kelly's run game and Ryan Day's passing game? Is it just getting the offensive line right? The defense played well in that game, but certainly playing well still down the stretch. What changed after that Michigan loss to get Ohio State playing the way they are now?
Stubbornness, I think, is what changed. And I think it's fair to say that Chip Kelly had a stubborn game plan in that Michigan game. When you have the weapons that Ohio State has, it is inexcusable to go in and not utilize those weapons to their fullest every single game. And they didn't against Michigan. It was like they were so principled that we are going to be physical and out-physical Michigan that they ignored what they're really great at. And what we've seen since then is, to your point, it's a bit of a marriage there. It's a bit of the offensive line. It's a lot of rolling pocket. So watch a couple of things that we've seen over the course of the playoff. Will Howard is either rolling out, which buys him more time behind that offensive line, or they're doing what they call a half roll, which is essentially they're moving the entire offensive line a certain number of steps to the right, and then they're planting so that he can throw. It's buying more time for the passing game. It's buying more time for your weapons to get open. By buying more time, now all of a sudden you're able to better utilize those weapons. Now that they're better utilizing those weapons, what are you going to do? Are you suddenly going to just weaken the box and let 2 great running backs go at you? You're going to try and figure out a way to slow those guys down. So I think, frankly, it's been the willing to be more pliable as a game caller that's been really beneficial. And they're going to need that against Notre Dame, because I'd argue the back end of Notre Dame's defense is probably the best in the country. They can cover. So while I still think Ohio State can score on anybody, I think this is where you need to have that fine balance between explosiveness and physicality to win the football game.
You just said it there, Notre Dame's defense, one of the best in the country, but I share that same kind of optimism that Ohio State can score against anybody. Where a lot of my confidence comes from for this game on Monday is I don't know how Notre Dame's going to be able to move the ball against this Ohio State defense. Is that an area of concern for you as well?
Yeah, look, you win and lose games in the college football playoff typically if you can run and if you can stop the run. So my two biggest concerns for Notre Dame, number one, their defensive line depth has been tested with injuries. I don't know how they're going to have the rotation they need to be able to stop Ohio State. I think in the second half, Ohio State's gouging for big runs in this because they're going to wear down. The other part of it, to your point, is that nothing they do on offense for Notre Dame looks easy. Riley Leonard has done a really nice job of figuring out a way to get 5 or 6 yards every single time. And that's fine. But look at what Notre Dame's offense is built around. The one thing they can't do is get behind schedule. They can't face second and long, third and longer. Those are two things that they're not built to win through. Even their weapons, I think, are meh, if we're being honest. So the thing here is that you've got an Ohio State defensive line that has been absolutely we talk about the sacks a lot. Let's talk more about the moving of the line of scrimmage. The minute the ball is snapped, the line of scrimmage moves to the favor of Ohio State. That speaks to the fact that they're pushing the offensive line. I don't know how Notre Dame stays on schedule there. Riley Leonard's going to have to use his legs a lot, and I'm talking about 15 to 20 carries for Riley Leonard, and he's going to have to find a way to turn all of those carries into 5 or 6 yards, and they're going to have to really control time of possession. Again, they do these things, yes, but I think if we were just taking the benefit of the doubt, everything has to go perfectly for Notre Dame to win this football game. Ohio State's built to be able to survive a couple of issues throughout the course of this and win this football game still.
13 catches for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns through the first 2 playoff games for Jeremiah Smith. And then against Texas in the semifinal, just 1 catch for 3 yards. If you asked a lot of people going into that game what the key to eliminating Ohio State would have been, I think most would have said erasing Jeremiah Smith. But even with him having just the 1 catch for 3 yards, Ohio State able to win that game by 2 scores. Who do you think is going to be the key offensively for Ohio State in this game against Notre Dame? Is it a bounce-back game for Jeremiah Smith or more from the running backs and the other receivers?
So let me get a little in the middle on this. Jeremiah was still the key last week. I don't care about the 1 catch. The part of this we got to understand is that Ohio State's second and third wide receivers would be number ones anywhere else in the country. Texas put so much allocated to making sure that they had spies on everything that Jeremiah was doing. So what did Will Howard do in that game that was particularly impressive? Will Howard did the one thing you have to do at quarterback when that's the game plan. He was patient. So, look, if they're going to sit there and let other NFL caliber wide receivers, Jeremiah would be the first overall pick in the draft this year. Let's not get it twisted. But the rest of that room, those are all guys that are going to play on Sundays. So now you still got a guy that's going to play on Sunday that's open 12 yards downfield. I'll take that all day. All day, every day. So the key to this game plan is patience, I think, and the key to this game plan player-wise is still going to be Jeremiah, because if they don't account for Jeremiah on every play, they will give up massive plays. The problem is if you give your entire defense the help it needs, if you shift your coverage over to block to shut down Jeremiah, you're essentially leaving another third of the field open and exposed. And then the other part of it is now all of a sudden you're light in the box. And if you're light in the box, man, Texas could afford to try to be light in the box. They got big boys on the defensive line. Again, that Notre Dame defensive depth, I think they're going to have to account for Jeremiah, which is going to leave them light in the box, which is why the both Ohio State running backs are going to feast in this. Look, guys, I want this to be a great game. I truly do. And I think, an epic college football championship game would be amazing. It's just when I stack the Legos, I can't build that castle. I think Ohio State is just too explosive.
I haven't been the biggest Will Howard guy all season. I haven't been anti-Will Howard. I just don't look at him and say, oh, man, it's a C.J. Stroud, Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields type. But I think what he's been through the playoffs has just been remarkable. I mean, throwing for over 300 yards a game, multiple touchdowns a game. Just what's from your chair, like how are you viewing the job that Will Howard has done? Because for Jeremiah Smith to be Jeremiah Smith, he has to have someone that's getting him the football, and he's not just wide open every time. He's catching these in a lot of tight windows and perfectly thrown, passes. Just what's your perception of Will Howard and how he's orchestrated this offense, especially following that Michigan loss and throughout this playoff run?
I think he's been decisive. I said patient earlier. The other part of it is pre-snap Will Howard right now is doing a really good job. And, so often we get used to being obsessed with quarterbacks like Caleb Williams was last year. Like we've seen, guys like Shedeur and Cam that are getting all this draft love. They're guys that can turn around and just make plays off schedule. I think where Will Howard has been at his best through the course of the college football playoff is pre-snap. He's doing a really good job of understanding what he's about to face defensively and what he needs to accomplish with the ball and do it fairly quickly. Again, while we talk about patience, part of that is understanding the reads and understanding where the defense is. Everybody so far in the playoffs has played so far back with the concept of I'm going to keep it in front of me, and then I'm going to be able to shut it down in the red zone, hold them to field goals. That's a way to win the game. That's fine until it isn't. You know what I mean? So, like, there's a part for me where Will Howard pre-snap has had such a good understanding of where the defense is going to be. That's part of what's allowed him to be patient. So I think the best part, look, Will Howard's still not the guy. I don't want to roll the football out and get into an off-schedule shootout where I'm running out and I got a quarterback running for my life and I'm asking Will Howard to win me the football game. That's not the path here. I don't think that has to be the path for this game. The biggest thing for Notre Dame is, can they, and they do this well, can they disguise what they're doing at the line of scrimmage? They do a really nice job of playing what looks like press coverage, and then they're not in press coverage, right? So if they can confuse Will Howard, that's their best shot to get Will to make a couple of mistakes, which they'll need. They have to win the turnover. In my mind, for Notre Dame to win this football game, they got to win the turnover battle by 2.
More with Yahoo Sports' Jason Fitz when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Continuing our conversation, Yahoo Sports' Jason Fitz hanging out with us here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Last thing on the college front, plenty of NFL playoffs I know happening too. This is a great time of year, by the way, if you're a football fan. I mean, no shortage of football content, that's for sure. Quinn Ewers, such a dynamic character right now. I don't really know what to make of Quinn. What's more likely, him going to the NFL or him returning to college? And if he does return to college, what's the chances that he could be the Buckeyes quarterback next season? Do you see, if he comes back to college, that he's Texas's quarterback? Because it sounds like all the rumblings are that Arch has been patient. He's waited his turn. His turn is officially now. But Quinn has regressed. His draft stock has kind of dropped significantly from the beginning of the season to now. And then there's those Buckeye blogger sites that just keep talking about this idea of Quinn Ewers with the Scarlet and Gray next year. How do you see the Quinn Ewers saga playing out?
Look, I don't think you want to get in. I think he's going to end up going into the NFL draft based on what he has said. I don't think he should go into the NFL draft. His regression this year was pretty staggering. And early in the season, he was doing a great job of climbing the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield. Really, his mechanics were spot on. Once he got hurt, everything changed for him moving forward. He has not been the same quarterback since he hurt his shoulder. So, look, he's not going to be Texas' starting quarterback in my mind next year. He's not back at Texas. The thing for me, for Ohio State fans, is I guess I would just ask everybody, is he worth $6 million? Because there are strong reports from solid reporters that he's got offers between $4 and $6 million. I've heard multiple times from people that I trust that Michigan State is prepared to offer him more than $4 million to come back. Let's be clear, $4 million would be more than Brock Purdy has made in his entire NFL career at this point. So I think it would make sense for him to come back and get that $4 million. I think we're going to see more and more of this. Like, quarterbacks that are sort of fringe second, third, fourth rounders going to come back and make more money playing one more year of college football. I think it's a beautiful thing. If I'm Ohio State, I know everybody wants to know what the answer is, but man, let me be clear. I feel better about Will Howard as the quarterback a year ago right now in the conversation than I do today about Quinn Ewers being my quarterback next year. Quinn Ewers feels like he's going to end up at some place like Michigan State, and they're going to be shocked when he loses in 3 or 4 games. Like, it's kind of like Auburn fans sitting there saying, how did Peyton Thorne lose me these football games? And I'm like, did you not watch Peyton Thorne? Like, what are we talking about? Quinn Ewers is going to be good enough to win 7 or 8 games on a pretty good football team, and he's not going to take – if I'm Ohio State, I don't want a quarterback that I think if you go back and truly watch the last 5 or 6 games, Quinn has been more of a liability than he has a help with a team that I don't think is ever maximize their weapons.
Before I switch over to the NFL, real quick, you said earlier in this segment that Ohio State fans shouldn't have merch about beating Michigan. They should have that merch and all the merchandise regarding a national championship. My good guy Jacob over here, I'm pretty sure his entire basement, he's the biggest Ohio State fan I know, it's only merchandise about beating Michigan. You'd argue it's just a shrine to beating Michigan opposed to Ohio State. So these people are psychos. I think Kirk was right. I think Kirk was a little bit right. Switching over to the NFL real quick. Mike Tomlin, he's 183, 107, and 2 as a head coach. He's phenomenal. I don't think anybody's really questioning his legacy. But if you were the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, if you were a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, I think it's about time that you'd want this relationship to come to an end, right? And I don't think he's going to get fired per se, but I think this is one of those amicable splits, I would say.
So this is where I'll disagree with you.
Okay.
Right now, in the AFC, and I looked it up. I had the notes the other day. I don't think I have them in front of me anymore. I looked it up the other day. The quarterbacks that have gone to the Super Bowl in the AFC, representing the AFC in the last 20 years, have been named Brady, Manning, Burrow, who I think we all agree is elite, right? Roethlisberger, who is going to be a fringe Hall of Famer. Go up and Mahomes, who already looks like a Hall of Famer. The only outlier, the only guy from the AFC that has even represented his conference in the Super Bowl in the last 20 years that wasn't at least at one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time or a Hall of Fame quarterback was Joe Flacco. That's your one outlier in the last 20 years. The Pittsburgh Steelers aren't going to the Super Bowl because they're in a conference that faces Burrow, Lamar, Allen, and Mahomes every single year. Yeah, okay, cool. You go get a new coach. What results that going to get you? Until you have an epic quarterback, you can't win in the AFC as it stands right now. So I understand everybody's frustrated with Tomlin because all he does is win. All he does is end up with the winning record. Okay, I'm sitting here talking to you wearing a Raiders hoodie. This is a true number. When the Raiders make their next head coaching hire, he will be their 15th full-time coach, not interim, 15th full-time coach in the last 31 years. So before you sit here and say, my God, I can't wait to get rid of Tomlin, I would ask you, without a quarterback and you still don't have one, how's the result going to be any different? And are you 100% sure you're not about to open the Pandora's box of 15 coaches in 31 years? I don't think it's happening. I understand Steelers fans are frustrated because they haven't gone to or won a Super Bowl, but I would also argue that you are now living up close and personal for the second straight generation what it's like to be taking on the greatest quarterback of all time. Nothing changes that. You lost some Super Bowl opportunities when you had Ben because you were taking on Manning and Brady. You're losing Super Bowl opportunities in general, even if you won in the playoffs. You ain't gonna. This team was not, even if they won over the weekend, they don't have Allen, Jackson, or Mahomes. They weren't going to the Super Bowl. And until they get Allen, Jackson, or Mahomes, they're not going to the Super Bowl either.
But I think the argument is that if Mike Tomlin's such a good coach, that they're never in a position to draft, a franchise quarterback and those 1 to 5 picks, what are they really accomplishing? I think that, I compared.
Yeah, but then what? What do you want to do? Do you want to be so bad that you want, if you're a Steelers fan, you want to dip your toe into winning 3 or 4 games and then just see how that feels for a minute to go get your quarterback? That's Russian roulette. And I remember so distinctly when the Raiders won the Super Bowl, or lost the Super Bowl, I should say, to Tampa Bay. I wish they'd won. I remember telling my buddy, because it was the 3rd or 4th year in a row we had lost late in the playoffs. I remember telling my buddy I would rather not even make the playoffs than have my heart broken in the playoffs yet again. That's what I said. Never would have imagined that I would then see over 10 straight years of double-digit losses. That's real. Yeah. So I just think Steelers fans need to, okay, you want to suck so bad you go get a quarterback. How are you certain that doesn't mean that you're now in the revolving door of being the Browns or being the Raiders or being the Jags or being the Titans? There's a whole group of teams out there that stink enough to go get a quarterback. I wish I had an easier answer for the Steelers, but honestly, the answer is to pay a king's ransom at some point, trade your entire draft to try and move up and get a quarterback. The answer is not to fire a coach that actually is winning games for you.
I think that's fair. And speaking of quarterbacks, one quarterback that might have had attention on him to move elsewhere, to be traded or whatever have you, Sam Darnold. I think he's lost all his money. How much money has Sam Darnold lost in these last 2 games?
I mean, it's catastrophic, the loss.
I think so too.
Here's what's wild is that Sam was bad last night. Bad against man coverage, held the ball too long. In fact, you actually saw Coach at one point screaming, "Gotta let it go." And you could read his lips, "Gotta let it go." I understand the sack numbers, 9 sacks, I think it was last night, are huge. But what did we just learn? If you're a team right now that needs a quarterback, what did you just learn? You better have a good offensive line. Because, if you get after Sam Darnold, he gets a little gun shy. Once he gets gun shy, this is the same seeing ghost Sam Darnold. Felt like he was seeing ghosts in that game last night. If I'm the Vikings, I'm probably still going to franchise him for a year. Because I got nothing to lose. I'm paying nothing for J.J. McCarthy. But I don't think Sam Darnold hits the open market, and I don't think that they trade J.J. I think they keep everything in case J.J. has a setback, in case he's not quite who they want him to be. You keep Sam Darnold for another year. But also, if Sam Darnold's people were going to come in and say, well, we don't want the franchise tag. We want a 3-year deal at $50 million, $55 million a year. Every team in the league should laugh at that now because you've gotten just enough proof. Boy, if you're a team that needs a quarterback, but you don't have a great offensive line, you don't have Justin Jefferson, and you don't have one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL, you might wake up and realize that you actually have old Sam Darnold, and that's not a good feeling to have, the Sam Darnold of every year until this year.
He's seeing ghosts. I will say this, too. I think we talked about it earlier. Who needs a championship more? Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman. Who needs Sunday more? Who needs a win on Sunday more? Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson?
That's a killer question.
Thank you.
I'm going to steal that from you for one of my shows this week. I think because there are so many people that have become galvanized one way or the other on Lamar, and they want to turn everything into Lamar. If he doesn't play well, I just think that stacks on him. The negativity for whatever reason hasn't stacked on Josh Allen the same way it's stacked on Lamar. And Lamar has flat out told us last week that, sometimes he puts too much pressure on himself in the playoffs. I think if Lamar plays poorly, that will become a loud roar on Lamar people. So I think Lamar, or anti-Lamar people, I think Lamar has to play incredibly well. I don't think the loser of this game should be faulted if they both have the game of their lives and it's an all-time classic. But, man, I think there's more pressure, weirdly, on Lamar than there is Josh Allen. And it's actually pretty incredible to me. Like, everybody was wrong about Josh Allen in the beginning and Lamar. But now that the pendulum has swung the other way, it just feels like Josh is sort of the wonder child, and rightfully so. By the way, guys, if I had an MVP vote, I would make them co-MVPs. I think they were both worthy of it this year. I don't think one has to be better than the other, but it's a great question. I think more pressure on Lamar.
I would agree with you. My last question before I switch it back over to Justin here. Your background, out of all the guests we've had, it might be the best background to a guest of all time. What records are behind you right there?
Okay, so I rotate them. I'll be honest, because humble brag, I got a lot of.
You got too many.
I don't have that. I do.
You got too many.
That is the one over here is Tim McGraw, a song called "If You're Reading This" that I played the violin on. That was from the ACM Awards. On that side is one of the Van Perry records, and right behind me is Matchbox 20, the Mad Season record, which went 4 times platinum, and I did some of the strings on that record. Out of shot, I've got Billy Gilman, Diamond Rio. Michael W. Smith, a couple of more Van Perrys, and a 300 million streams for If I Die Young from Spotify. So I've got another handful of. I think that's a few more. Yeah.
I don't know if you heard this, but I was all city for my elder tennis team, senior year of high school. So that's my big award. That's my big award. I'm gonna.
Let's go.
Yeah, I rotate that and Jacob's "I Hate Michigan" T-shirt, and then that's our. Go ahead, Justin, take it away.
One last thing for you, Jason. We had a Raiders hoodie. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. The Bengals completed an interview with Patrick Graham, the Raiders defensive coordinator, and after the Raiders fired Antonio Pierce as well as a one and done, there were some linkings that with the Bengals also having an open linebackers coach role, hiring Patrick Graham and bringing in Pierce to reprise his role as a linebackers coach was an option for the Bengals. Rooting for the team that Patrick Graham was previously the defensive coordinator of. How do you think Bengals fans should feel about that potential hire?
Run, don't walk to Patrick Graham. I think he's a spectacular defensive coordinator. The only thing I would say, and this is something Raiders fans had to learn, it took 2 years. Patrick Graham's defenses are complicated, and he asks for a lot of communication from a lot of guys. It took the first year of it. Raiders fans were screaming everywhere, fire him, he's a bum, this defense sucks. And then all of a sudden, everything clicked. So what you need for Patrick Graham is you need a little patience. I think it's a 2-year defense, and you need guys that are going to stick around for the duration of that. So you want guys, if you've got young guys, you need young guys that are going to be in the system for a couple of years. If you get veterans, you need like a veteran that really knows. Like you want a veteran safety. Bringing in a veteran safety was a big part of what helped the Raiders defense really turn around under Patrick Graham. He is a great defensive coordinator.
All right, good stuff. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, what projects can people find you on shows heading into this national championship game and throughout the NFL playoffs, of course?
Check out Yahoo Sports. You can check out the YouTube page or on social media, Inside Coverage, College Football Power Hour. We're doing NFL and college football coverage for you there. And you can follow me on social media at Jason Fitz.
All right, good stuff. Jason, you the man. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
All right, more Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers when we come back. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kenner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tisson with you here. Casey McAllister in on the producer chair. All this stuff that we had to ask him, and literally Dion just was not important enough to ask about with the Cowboys. I mean,
yeah, that's a mess. That's a mess.
By the way, real quick,
yeah.
I got to thank Jacob. The question that he liked, that was your question.
It was.
But I will say,
I did help.
I did word it a little bit.
You did
differently.
great. No,
I worded it a little, but it was your question.
But I told you to ask it.
It was his
because
question.
It was a good question. No,
it was his question.
I wasn't going to.
So I'm going to give
that.
Somebody else wouldn't have. A lesser man wouldn't have credited Jacob just then. I'm going to give Jacob credit in saying Jacob came to me before the show. You should ask this question. I'm like, okay. So
Thank you.
That's very good.
I appreciate it.
I was gonna bring up the fact that you have a statue or a shrine in your basement of I believe it's I think this is from our good friend Michael Ackley. I believe it's an Ohio State player urinating on the Michigan logo.
This is true.
So I was gonna bring that one up, but I didn't want to bring that one up. So instead, I just said I hate Michigan T-shirts. Is what you.
I got a few of those.
Yeah, I know you.
I got a few of those.
by the way, no, great question, but I mean, I thought that would be a normal. I thought that would be a normal sports talk.
I thought so too.
There's more pressure. Like I thought it was a generic Freeman or Day. Which one's more pressure?
Well, way to dunk on Elliott.
No. That's not
I
what
chose the other one. Listen. This is a sports talk show.
Yeah.
You have to give differing sports opinions. That was my different sports opinion.
We're allowed to give differing sports opinions as long as they're not different opinions on the Bengals. Outside
Correct.
of that, we
Correct.
could talk politics.
Here
We
we
could
go.
talk religion. But if you question Joe Burrow,
That's right.
rules are just
Let me ask
thrown
you
out
this:
the
do you have
window.
any questions regarding Joe Burrow after this season?
I think it's. Are we really doing that?
Well, I
would think you'd probably have a few.
you have a couple.
Because hold on.
Playoffs.
Hold on. I'll find my list. It's no. All right. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Real quick, I do have to ask you for the Cincinnati Bengals. You didn't really go into detail during the break, but like you asked him about that possibility of the Raiders defensive coordinator becoming the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator. His response, you weren't a fan of.
Not that I wasn't a fan of it. I think Patrick Graham is kind of on the outside looking in of this Bengals defensive coordinator role. He was the first interview that they got done, but haven't really heard much about him since then. But the description he gave of Patrick Graham reminded me of Lou Anarumo. You need an elite safety.
Yeah.
They brought in a veteran to call the plays. You need a lot of communication. You need everyone to do their job. It takes a little bit to get, it mixed within the system and understand what's going on. It sounds very, very similar to Lou Anarumo, and I just don't know if I want to go back down that path with this hire. I would like to have someone with a little bit higher of a floor. I think my main takeaway from that description of a guy that rooted for the team Patrick Graham called defensive plays for is maybe his floor isn't so high if you don't have guys that can do those things. And that's certainly my concern with the Bengals as we progress and move through this offseason is I don't know that they're going to spend enough money to get elite players on the defense or enough elite players on the defense. So I want a defensive coordinator that's going to raise the floor of the guys we already have in here, and it doesn't necessarily sound like Patrick Graham's that guy.
So, obviously with the new – and by the way, yesterday, did the Mike McCarthy thing happen after our show? That happened after, right?
Seconds after.
That's what I thought.
1
so,
second.
with Mike McCarthy being out in Dallas, that means one name that you guys had floated out recently was Mike Zimmer, but he's with Dallas, so I didn't think anything of it. But now all those coaches are looking for jobs. And, obviously, what would – Mike Zimmer look like in Cincinnati? Is that a possibility? And do you see, would it be a surprise if out of nowhere you see on social media, the Cincinnati Bengals have interviewed Mike Zimmer for their defensive coordinator's position?
I would probably bet a significant amount of money that they will interview Zimmer. It just seems like something the Bengals would do to at least check that box. I would be floored if they hired Mike Zimmer as their next defensive coordinator. Not only was he not good in Dallas this year, they were worse than Cincinnati was defensively. So that's not an answer to what we need now. That's certainly not a route I would go, but I would certainly expect the Bengals to spin the tires on that. A reunion seems like something that they usually have interest in. So whether they make the move or not, it would be pretty Mike Brown-esque to at least give him an interview.
I think, it would make sense for the Bengals as an organization to bring back somebody that's familiar with Cincinnati and maybe that had a good relationship with the Browns. I don't know if he did, but who knows? I agree with Jacob. I think it would be a pretty bad move, but it's certainly going to be a name that's thrown out there. I just don't. It depends what you think the Bengals are capable of, how much money they're capable of spending on a DC. I don't think that number is very high. I think it's going to be right around that $1.5 to $2 million range. And if that's the case, who are you able to get with that number? That That's why I said the Eberflus thing, it would be a shock to me. That would be like a higher-end guy. I don't think you're going to see much bigger names than that. Zimmer could fly under that bubble. He could fly under the $1.5 million range, right around there at least. So I could see it. It wouldn't be a good move, but I could see it.
So, and that's why we talked, I think, before the show. I do like the Golden possibility from not, whether you like it or not. It seems to be a realistic one. All of a sudden, the Bengals have kind of gone quiet on the interview front. And it's like there's either a defensive coordinator that they're looking at that's currently in the playoffs for the NFL, and I don't think that's the case. Look at all the teams left. Is there any DC on any team that's left that has any kind of Bengals ties, or that why would they leave their current playoff team to go to Cincinnati? And again, that's not a shot. It's just why would that happen?
Right, and it wouldn't even be a DC. Probably. I mean, if you're in the playoffs here and, in the divisional round, then you would be hiring a D-line coach, a linebackers coach, something for this defensive coordinator role. And I can't imagine the Bengals are going to go that route. So I don't think it's anyone that's still active, which is why I'm a little weirded out by the lack of interviews.
But Golden's why that makes sense, and that fits
it
what
does.
you think the price range would be. And I know we talked about this yesterday, but
a little less so than a lot of people think. I've seen a lot of people throw his name out there as like the cheaper DC option.
But if they win a national championship and shut down that defense, you have to think, hey, we're going to bump that price up.
He just signed an extension this last offseason for 4 years, $9 million.
Yeah.
So that's up over $2 million, close to $2.5 million. That's a pretty big time offer. I think that's about the ceiling of what the Bengals would be willing to pay. I think you'd need to at least give him the same, if not a little bit more, to get him out of South Bend to come to Cincinnati. And I think he'd be interested, but I've seen a lot of people putting him in that bargain tier, and I think he's up there with one of the more expensive guys the Bengals could potentially hire.
Two names that float out, that one name just became readily available, and Antonio Pierce as a defensive coordinator possibility. What about Marvin Lewis? What about Marvin Lewis as your defensive coordinator?
You want to talk about names that would really upset everybody.
Would that truly disappoint everybody?
It would.
Okay, that's fair.
This is like I think people have calmed down on what Marvin Lewis was in Cincinnati. I think he's gotten his flowers. I know it ended as badly as it could end, and we ran out of patience for somebody who had unlimited time. I just think that if you start bringing up these old names who didn't have a ton of success here, or hasn't had success lately, I don't think it's the way to go. I think if you go to the Zach Taylor, we want a young Sean McVay coaching tree kind of guy, it's probably going to be the same. I want a young defensive coordinator who is ready to prove himself, or somebody who's been in college and wants to prove himself in the league. I have a hard time believing it's going to be an older defensive coordinator.
Now, if they go the Patrick Graham, Antonio Pierce, linebackers coach route that we were just talking about with Jason Fitz, Marvin Lewis currently the Raiders' assistant head coach. He worked directly under Antonio Pierce in Vegas. He worked with Antonio Pierce at Arizona State as well. So if you had the Patrick Graham DC, Antonio Pierce linebackers coach, it wouldn't shock me at all if Marvin Lewis was on the staff somewhere. But I would certainly be opposed to and shocked if he was the defensive coordinator at any point.
Yeah, and I'll never say Herm Edwards. Sorry, when you said Antonio Pierce, it made me think of Herm Edwards because that's who the staff he was on at Arizona State. But no, when you say Marvin Lewis too, he's one of those. I'm not saying he never wants to be a head coach again, but it would be a safer hire if you're one of those like, okay, we could bring in someone that knows how to run a defense, and I may not have to be looking over my shoulder the entire time. But again, with the Bengals budget, I don't think they're bringing anyone in that is going to be a potential future head coach, at least unless they go the Anarumo route and all of a sudden have a great year. And Anarumo is a head coach name that was thrown around for a while a few years ago. Speaking of Anarumo, I just saw a little bit ago earlier today that we could talk about the Bengals reuniting with Mike Zimmer, but Anarumo might be reuniting with the former Bengal as well, and it could be over in Atlanta with Mr. Jesse Bates. So that could be an intriguing landing spot for old Anarumo.
The two destinations that have been listed so far for Lou Anarumo, San Francisco and Atlanta, I think he would hit it out of the park in both. I think they have the pieces that he needs to run his defense, specifically Atlanta. We know what Jesse Bates can do in this scheme, in this system, and how good he's played in it before. And the other pieces on that Atlanta defense are really, really good too. Casey and I have believed in that Falcons defensive unit for a couple years now, and if they can get Lou Anarumo to call the plays down there with some of the stars that they have. That's what we've always talked about in Cincinnati. Lou's defense doesn't work without stars.
Yep.
And it's a tough place to be in when you don't have them. But since they do, I think that'd be a pretty great hire. And it might be tough for Bengals fans to watch Lou Anarumo and Jesse Bates tear it up in the NFC South.
Another NFL note from our conversation with Jason Fitz. The Mike Tomlin conversation. The one thing people throw out a lot, there's a narrative that gets thrown out a lot about Tomlin's struggles in the playoffs for years, going back to the dynasty of the Patriots. That the Patriots, are kept the. That Tom Brady and the Steelers only faced each other once in the playoffs since the Steelers last won their Super Bowl. Like, the Patriots were not a team that was knocking out the Steelers out of the playoffs every single year. Now, an argument can be made if you look at the recent playoff run for Mike Tomlin and company, the last 4 quarterbacks to knock out the Steelers, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Baker Mayfield. Those are the last 4 quarterbacks to knock out the Steelers out of the playoff. But during the last 10-year stretch as well, Tom Brady has knocked them out once. But Blake Bortles has knocked them out of the playoffs. Tim Tebow has knocked them out of the playoffs. Baker Mayfield, as I mentioned, and Baker Mayfield, the season he had now, knocking you out wouldn't surprise you. But again, in Cleveland, so it's just kind of one of those things where I get why people are trying to bend over backwards to defend Tomlin, but let's not act. It's not like they're beating bad teams in the playoffs or the teams they should beat in the playoffs and then running into Patrick Mahomes or Lamar or a Tom Brady back in the day in the AFC Championship game. They're not even winning in the playoffs, period. So, but I do see both sides as the alternative is just, do we win 3 games every year until we get a Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar type? I don't know. But I do think winning 8, 9, 10 games every single year, that ain't it. That ain't going to do it. So I don't know. I think they're in the worst spot. I think that's weird to say.
I think it's the worst place to be as an NFL fan.
The Browns have a better chance.
For the last decade. I would rather go 0-16 and 3 and whatever and be picking at the top of the draft and swinging and missing than going into every season with Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson and knowing you're going to win 9 games and have 0 shot at winning a Super Bowl. If you're in the bottom where we've been before, if you're in the bottom picking at the top of the draft, you can talk yourself into optimism of whoever you pick turning things around. Yep. They can't have optimism anymore, right?
Everything is
optimism
hope.
Had to have left that building 5 years ago.
I don't know if about 5 years ago, because I think this year brought a little bit of the magic back. Because I don't think anybody thought Russell Wilson would be good. I don't think anybody thought Justin Fields would be as good as he was. And you have that little run at the beginning of the season where it's like, okay, this is a good team. We're watching it, and I had to eat crow on this show because I said, just like the Broncos, I don't believe in them. And I think there was a turning point once you start like 10-2 or whatever they did, where you have to sit back and say, okay, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. But the hard schedule at the end beat them down, as we all said it would. And we got to the playoffs, and here we are again, where the Steelers aren't still in the postseason. They get bounced, and they get bounced harder than anybody when it comes to the playoffs. So I don't know where you go if you're Pittsburgh. I think if Mike Tomlin stays, you're going to be trying to find a diamond in the rough with a veteran starting quarterback. And if that doesn't work, next year you do the same exact thing until maybe one day it hits. But that one day is a long time away, based on the fact that you've had 0 success in the playoffs since 2016? It's just been a long, long time since they've seen meaningful playoff football, and I don't see a way out of it for them unless they get some type of franchise quarterback, which we all know won't happen as long as Mike Tomlin's there. It's a tough place to be. I don't think he'll be fired. I think he's earned the respect.
0%.
I also don't think he should be fired. I think it should be, hey, should we go in different directions, both of us, like a mutual split?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There were reports about both quarterbacks this morning. Russell Wilson said that he wants to return to Pittsburgh, and it was also reported that the Steelers are working with Justin Fields to have a contract extension done before free agency would start, so before he hits the open market. So it seems like Russ wants to come back. Steelers might not be as interested.
Yeah.
And Fields is a perfect QB for Pittsburgh to get that extension done with, because he's either going to be your backup, and you already have a good, solid backup, or he's going to be your starter. Either way, Steelers are not going to be labeled as Super Bowl favorites heading into next season. But that drives me nuts for a franchise that just hangs their hat on all those Super Bowls. And it's like, but that's not who you are right now, and that's not even your goal. And the reason I know it's not your goal is because you're working on an extension for Justin Fields. Like,
that's fair.
I mean,
but fair.
Yeah.
Are we done? Are we gonna like next year when they start like 10-3? Are we gonna be done believing in them, no matter what? Because I think I'm done. This was the last.
They got
straw.
me. I said they're the best team in the AFC North. They got me this year.
They got me too. They got me back in on it. I'm going to be done next year when they start unbelievably hot and everybody tells me how good the defense is and how good they look. I'm going to be done. I'm gonna point back to their last 6 or whatever 7 playoff losses, and I'm gonna say they have stunk for a very long time. They choked down the stretch, and they're not the team that you're seeing right now. So I'm out. If they start undefeated, if they go undefeated next year, I'm out.
I wish I could agree with you. I just know I can't quit Justin Fields. If he's their quarterback.
Let's
there's
say it's
just no
Aaron
way.
Rodgers.
Oh, I mean, then they'll lose there.
Kirk
the other
Cousins.
side of it, are we going to do the same thing we do every offseason? This is the first year Mike Tomlin's not going above 500. Because we've done it the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And we know that they're going to.
Which is crazy, but yeah, I mean, you're right.
I can't. If there was ever a year, it was supposed to be
It
this
was
year.
supposed to be this year.
That schedule, the bad quarterback play. They did go on a 5-game losing streak down the stretch, but that's how good they were to start. That they were
checked
10-3.
every box that we would
It
have
should
put
not have
out
happened.
there to finish below 500, and they didn't.
And it's such a weird thing, too, because people make it so much about the quarterback. But I'm here to tell you, we did this. Mason Rudolph finished he had a winning record in Pittsburgh. All right, Kenny Pickett had a winning record in Pittsburgh. Justin Fields has a winning record in Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson has officially found a way to break that little trend right there. But the bottom line is like it's the quarterback, yes, but Mike Tomlin's been able to win with average to below average quarterback play since Ben Roethlisberger. And even Ben Roethlisberger, geriatric Big Ben, was finding ways to win games down the stretch. So either way. All right, Justin Kinner, Elliot Ruring, Jacob Tissett, Casey McCollister in the producer chair. While we're on the NFL's topic, let's go ahead and bring up that Bengals graphic for the draft coming up. Obviously, the defensive coordinator conversation will continue. But with the draft coming up around the corner, Chatterbox Sports put out this graphic yesterday regarding the top targets, draft targets that we're probably going to be talking about these names the most as the draft nears. Obviously, you didn't think we'd be talking draft at this point in January, especially with a couple weeks to go in the NFL season. But the bottom line is, now that the regular season's come to a close, you've had a week and a half, 2 weeks to kind of digest it a bit. You look at these names. These are the names. This is the list. We talked about Jack Sawyer yesterday, but this is the list right here of the names that Jake and some of the other Chatterbox Bengals crew kind of put together of names to keep an eye out for and an ear out for as we kind of really start to pick it up draft talk-wise as the draft nears in a few months.
Number 3 on the left side. That's my guy.
You're all about Ashton Jeanty, huh?
That's right.
Woof. Not my pick.
That's my pick, baby.
Out of these
Let's go,
10,
Ashton.
He's the one that doesn't really fit for me, but obviously a big name in that 17th overall range. So
Best player available.
It makes sense. Yeah, it certainly would be. And that formula has worked for a lot of teams that have won a lot of playoff games. So maybe best player available is a way that the Bengals go. But another player on that list that jumps off as best player available to me, and ignoring positional value and where players usually go in the draft if they're just really, really good, it's Tyler Booker, the second guy on the right side, the guard out of Alabama. He was a 5-star recruit out of IMG, an absolute mauler at the guard position, one of the best run blockers in the entire class. I think he's a no-brainer first-round pick, and I would be over the moon if the Bengals were to draft him at 17. But outside of him, a lot of offensive linemen on that board right there. And people might be saying, well, why offensive line? The defense was the biggest problem this year. I think the floor of this offense or the ceiling, I should say, is kind of locked in place with the unathletic offensive line. I just absolutely hate what our guards are able to do in the run game and in the pass game. So getting any of these tackles that have guard flexibility as well as Booker would be phenomenal. And then obviously the bulk of this, defensive ends and D linemen, we need a pass rush. Pass rush will help the secondary. Pass rush will help the linebackers. This Bengals team needs a pass rush. Both those Texas A&M edges, and we talked about Jack Sawyer yesterday, and then the interior Kenneth Grant from Michigan. All 3 would be great picks for the Bengals as well.
So let's pick up with this. A lot of names on that list. I know you already threw out Ashton Jeanty, and that's one of those, like, would he help? Yes. Would that be a nice little combo, punch to put in the run game? Yes, but with so many other needs, it just seems silly to even think of Ashton Jeanty in Cincinnati with that pick right there. But let's pick up with the draft talk. We're going to tag Casey in on this as well. We'll be right back as we close out the radio portion of this. More off the bench when we come back. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Appreciate Jason. Jason Fitz going to hang out with us every Tuesday all the way through the Tuesday after the Super Bowl. So appreciate him doing that. And we're lining up some more guests for the rest of the week. We'll keep you guys updated on that. Again, NFL playoffs ongoing. Draft talk will pick up more and more over the weeks, but while we're on the topic now, I think it's good to just start looking at some names early on, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Casey, throw out that graphic back up there again. The guys from Chatterbox Bengals throughout Chatterbox, of course, kind of put a list of guys together. Jacob, of course, I know you spearheaded a lot of these names, and I think that if you could add 100 names, I'm sure you would have had 100 names ready to go.
I'm up to 76.
Up to 76
on my big board, so we're getting there. We're getting there.
Those names right there. What's the name that, like, if that name's available, you would be very disappointed if that name is not called on draft night?
I mean, shocking enough for people that watch this show, I usually flip-flop as much as anyone in the world, but it's the same answer I had about 2 months ago. It's James Pierce, the Tennessee edge rusher. He was in number 1 overall conversations just a few months ago, especially going into this season. He was viewed as one of the top players in this entire draft. And at edge rusher, that's no doubt a position of need. We talked about Jack Sawyer yesterday and how he fits a lot of those boxes that the Bengals look for, both physically and in terms of college production, but I think James Pierce is an absolute home run player, and a lot of people would point to him as maybe more of a project because he's not physically quite to where you want him to be yet, but he's had sack production multiple years at Tennessee. He's been unbelievable and a really, really good defense. I know he didn't look great against Ohio State, but no one on the Tennessee defense did. That was an outlier game that I'm choosing to look at as such. But Pierce, a guy with 7.5 sacks this year, 9.5 sacks the year before, consistent production, a really, really good player on an SEC defense. I think he would be a beautiful, beautiful draft pick for the Bengals.
Yeah, I tagging myself in here. Hello, listeners.
You didn't tag yourself in, Casey. We want you to tag.
Hi, Casey.
Yeah, so when it comes to the draft talk and draft conversations, Bengals like to go for specific types of profiles and things of that nature. So most of the time when we make these lists, sometimes those players don't usually fit on the list. James Pierce was one of those guys that does not really fit their profile, but we would both be disappointed if he was not selected for the Bengals.
Hey, Casey, their profile stinks.
The profile does stink. It does stink. It does. It just straight up does. Jack Sawyer is one of those guys that we talked about earlier on this week, being that pick. I wouldn't be upset if that was the pick, to be honest with you. I think I would be okay with that being the 17th pick. Some of the other selections that I think might get overlooked that have been kind of late risers, I'm not going to butcher his first name, but Williams, the defensive tackle for Ohio State, I think he's a guy that fits that sort of mold that they're looking for as a defensive tackle.
Tyleek.
Okay, Tyleek. And then Tyler Warren, I know that tight ends in the first round are kind of scary, but here recently, tight ends in the first round have been working. And
Recently being most recently.
Most recently.
One example.
Yeah. And I would say like Laporta too, like those guys that are picked in the top 50 have been working out as of late. Tyler Warren for Penn State, and I know I'm a Penn State guy, but he's a guy that I think if you had any doubts about what that tight end room, what it did this year, and I know that the injury to Eric All could possibly slow him down since it's the same knee, there's a chance that you take him there if he's falling and you don't like what the board is shaking out to be. Like if all the edge rushers are gone, and you don't feel like you want to take a guard or a tackle, maybe Warren can maybe fit in that spot, but that's very, very low on the list of needs for the Bengals.
A lot of people push back on tight end positional value, but Warren is such a dominant receiver that it just doesn't even fall in that same window. It's very similar to Brock Bowers, and what he can do is that power slot and stretch the field and create separation. He's more of a wide receiver.
Yeah, that's like for me, that's like the backup plan if T. Higgins is not a Bengal.
Where you guys?
You know who my T. Higgins backup plan is?
Who would that be, Jacob?
Harold, number 1 tight end in the class, Harold Fannin. Tyler Warren's great. Everyone loves him. Don't forget about the Bowling Green kid.
What about, I mean, obviously you took the tight end last year, obviously against, I mean, many people said, hey, with all the injury issues in college, sure enough, those injury issues, I mean, it didn't take long for that. Is that why there'd be hey, we need to get a tight end in this draft and possibly using a first-round pick in that mold?
I think Tyler Warren's an extreme outlier to
Okay.
where we're talking about taking him in the first round with the player that he could potentially be and the prospect that he is. Depending on what he runs, I'm not even sure he'll be there at 17. That's how good of a prospect I think he is. But I'm very high on Eric All. I think whether the Bengals draft a tight end or how much effort they put into re-signing Gesicki or signing someone else or whatever that is going to be a direct representation of how they view Eric All's injury and his ability to bounce back from that second ACL tear in a span of about 12 months. Very, very scary. So I don't love putting all our eggs in that basket, but he looked awesome when he was on the field.
The only way I would be okay with that is if the Bengals knew that T. Higgins being a Bengal wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And you draft at least one more receiving option, because we keep saying we want a receiver. And though we should obviously, we're going to need to replace Jermaine Burton now as well coming into next season. But having another throwing option to a guy like this, that's one where I would be okay with it. As long as I knew that you just were not going to sign T. Higgins and you were going to give up on that plan. Because Joe Burrow does need another option besides Jamar Chase out there.
And we're pretty sure Burton is taking his last snap in Cincinnati, right? Is that project
I think Jacob's a little bit more high on it than me. I certainly don't think – well, again, there's no way of knowing until everything – comes out, and obviously it looks absolutely horrible right now. I want him nowhere near the Cincinnati Bengals organization.
It just seems to it just escalated as the season went on. It was, why isn't he, it started in preseason? It started in preseason with the not paying attention or staying awake in meetings or showing up to meetings. And then it just showed up to him just not, getting any playing time at all. And then it was he doesn't make a trip. And then it turns into it was almost like, Burrow and everyone
I think
talking about him in the meetings. And then it's like it escalated every couple weeks throughout the season. It's like, yes, you got to make sure you let everything play out to find out all the details. But at the same time, it's like you just seem to keep finding yourself in these scenarios that we're not talking football with you. We're talking everything but football. When you had an opportunity to come in to be a guy that was going to make this like the reason this T. Higgins thing is such a big deal and a struggle is because Burton didn't do what he was supposed to. Burton was supposed to come in and show that he was the guy to take on that load moving forward. And he had an opportunity of a lifetime, and he has squandered it. Maybe there's a redemption opportunity down the road, but right now it doesn't look good.
If there's a redemption opportunity, it can be somewhere else because it will not be here.
Fair enough.
And I have a hard time believing that he'd have a role anyway. I mean, he wasn't good enough to play last year. Otherwise, he'd be in. He would have played in those first few weeks if he was good enough, and he wasn't. So I think he was solid as a returner. I would have liked to see him be a good Bengal. He wasn't. He's not, and he never will be. We'll find out more with everything that comes out with the ongoing investigation. I think it's terrible, so I'm done with it. There's honestly no room for distractions on this team right now. No room for it.
Statistically, almost no chance that he is beneficial to the Bengals on offense either, with the number of receptions he got in his rookie year. Wide receivers picked in the top 100 picks that of his production as a rookie just don't last on the team that drafted him. So even removing all the off-the-field stuff, statistically just with the NFL, doesn't look promising for Jermaine Burton.
All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. I know we have the red stuff that we'll get into post-radio, but any closing draft stuff before we move on with the Reds?
None for the Bengals, but I just wanted to go back to your take a little bit earlier.
We ended with a fight yesterday. We're going to do
it
today,
I just wanted to go back because I think you want Shedeur Sanders. I think that's who you want. And that's okay to want him. I mean, if I were a Browns fan, I'd want a quarterback that was serviceable, that I've seen play at a high level in college. I think he is that. I think he's capable of being that. I don't know if I'd want the distraction, but you clearly do. You're willing to put up with it. They've drafted 75 quarterbacks in the last 25 years, so I think the hit rate's there. I just find it interesting, and I think Casey has the clip. There was a clip of you, and shout out to the chat. The chat was sending me time codes throughout the entirety of this program. And we got, I believe, the exact time code of where you start talking about it. But this was earlier in the year when you had a little discussion about Shedeur Sanders going to the Browns. So, Casey, do you mind rolling the clip?
Yeah, I got it here.
Of course you do. All right. I think Cam Ward in Cleveland is a legit possibility. I think Cam Ward in Cleveland. I don't. If I'm Shedeur, I promised you this. It is October 2nd, 2024. If Shedeur Sanders is a Cleveland Brown, I'm Houdaing it up with all of you. All right? I'm Houdaing it up with. I will become a Bengals fan. The second that Shedeur Sanders is drafted to Cleveland,
boy.
I am a Bengals fan. And
I
I
think
am not.
you have
That's
to-
not even a joke. I am
Not
being
even a
1,000,000%.
joke.
I will
You clarified you weren't
reach
kidding.
out to the Bengals communications department and just have a message relayed to Joe Burrow. I will be sorry for every bad thing I said about you. That is how serious I am. I do not want to
He's
deal
dead
with
serious.
the Shedeur
He's dead
noise
serious.
in Cleveland.
I
at
think
all.
you'd have to go through.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So
Not
we're-
only are
we're-
you
we're-
rescinding your Browns fandom,
Yeah.
but you were going to be a Bengals fan now.
and you have to take back everything you said about Burrow.
We're welcoming you
and
with
then you
open
have to reach
arms.
out to the Bengals PR. So you got a lot of work to do
You
here.
put a lot on your table, on your plate.
you
here.
better pray that he's not
Do
a
you
Brown.
realize how much has changed since October, whatever the hell that date
Material
was?
change.
No.
Oh,
the
Deshaun
change-
got hurt again?
No.
Who
no,
could've guessed
it's not
it?
really defending. I'm just saying I'm laughing at the bar at the bottom that said Jalen
Milrow.
Milrow, the first quarterback.
Jalen Milrow first overall.
That's
being,
why. That's what I'm alluding to. That look.
That's a good point.
I'm not changing the subject. It all ties in here. Fitz said it a little bit
Shout
ago.
out
We asked
Everett.
about the Steelers having to go and do you win 3 games, win 4 games to pick at the top of the draft just to get a quarterback? Well, this is what happens. Like the Browns win 3 games, you get the number 2 pick, and then these are the quarterbacks that are available to you. Wouldn't that be ironic? The Steelers, the one time that they decide to tank, this would be the type of quarterback class that you're forced with.
That's a good point. They did get the number one drafted quarterback not too long ago.
Yeah,
Just
and-
at 20.
So I got nothing to say. You got me. That's damning evidence.
That was your
there.
friend.
Yet again, we didn't get you.
I got myself.
You got you for like the 6th time.
Yeah, all the times. All the times. That was your good friend Everett and Mouse Cop who helped out with that one.
Everett, of course, Everett. Shout out to Everett. Damn it, Everett. And Mouse Cop doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. Look, I am a hypocrite, I guess. I have nothing to defend myself with at this point. To be fair, I did not think it would get this bad.
That's fair.
I did not think that it would get this bad. And at that time, I just thought it was absolutely insane to even be talking about the Browns taking a quarterback in the draft, because not in my wildest dreams did I think that they would have the number 2 pick in the draft. And then in typical Browns luck fashion, you get the number 2 pick in a season where it's Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and it was a draft that was supposed to have Quinn Ewers being a guy that was supposed to be a top 10 pick. There was supposed to be a lot of options, a lot of names to pick from. And Shedeur, if his dad's not Deion Sanders, I don't think there's even intrigue on my behalf. I think that right now, though, because of how bad it has got to the point with Deshaun, and there's a glimmer of hope that they might be able to get out of some of these guarantees, that they maybe could ride the ship just a little bit. I do like the style of play of Shedeur, that I think that if things go right, obviously Kevin Stefanski is a guy that I think would be beneficial for him if he is able to be a good NFL quarterback. I know it's the Browns. I can't defend the Browns. The Browns are not a destination spot where you think if that quarterback goes there, they'll have success. But I will say for Kevin Stefanski, I feel good that if they do take a quarterback at number 2, whether it is, and Jackson Dart is darting up the boards, by the way. What do you think of that, by the way?
The least surprising thing I've ever seen. That
But
he's going to get
is-
picked higher than everyone thought. And he's terrible.
Is he Bo Nix?
I think he's like Jamarcus Russell. Like he's
Jesus,
horrendous.
dude.
Like I think
What did he do to
I think
you?
Jackson Dart is. I think he's a bigger distraction than Shedeur Sanders in terms of locker room and off the field. I think he's a terrible leader, and I think he's the social media quarterback that everyone talks about with great numbers and blowouts against bad teams and disappears in good games. I am not a Jackson Dart fan going into this class.
Fair enough, and that will be your number 2 pick probably.
Probably.
Because that's how my luck goes. No, look, I was not a fan of Shedeur, and I'm not a big fan of it now. But I guess what I'm falling for is the glamour and all that stuff. I guess I'm just falling for that because these quarterbacks aren't that good. I don't think anyone looks at these guys and say there's a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen or a Lamar.
Are we
in this
locking
group.
in Cam Ward at 1? Is that what this conversation is?
I mean, I think you would have to at this point, but
I don't think they're going to take a quarterback.
Deion to Dallas throws a lot of wrenches into this, by the way.
I think Tennessee's going to sit and pick at 1 and take like Abdul Carter or Brandon Graham. And then they're going to make you decide to take one of the second-round quarterbacks in the top 5.
But then what does Tennessee do? Do they go the Kirk Cousins route? Do they go
Rodgers.
Rodgers route?
Or round 2, round 3 quarterback, picking at 33
This is
or 65.
a crappy draft to have a top 3 pick in.
And then,
It's not if you have a quarterback. There is elite
yes,
talent
sorry.
in this
Yes.
top 10. That's why I was so gung-ho about the Bengals losing some games down the stretch if
Yeah.
they weren't going to get into the playoffs, because you have guys like
Stuff was
Abdul
gonna drop
Carter,
through.
Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham.
Yeah.
These guys are studs, absolute blue-chip studs. And but if you need a quarterback, we see teams reach and pass on more sure things all the time.
All right. Well, in the interest of fairness, you got me. I'm not even going to
You got
defend
got.
myself. I got. There you go. So, anyways, I feel like
tried your best.
I feel like Emmanuel Acho. You got me.
Yeah.
You got me this week.
It is going to save you that the lower third on the bottom of that is Jalen Milroe, first overall quarterback.
Well, the
Because
whole
it
time-
just shows how long ago that
Yeah.
was.
How long? But it wasn't that long ago.
It was October.
It was October.
Yeah.
Right? That's not that long ago. Do we consider that long ago?
In the sports takes world, when we do 10 hours a week, that is eons ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Eons.
Fair enough. See, I knew you guys would understand.
We need to give you one. We need to get you to have one Colin Cowherd take. I don't know what take that would be, but we need one to be like the one that's.
Hey, LeBron?
It's,
Hey, LeBron?
It's okay, Ben.
We're good.
It's okay, LeBron.
Ben
We
Simmons
have
is
Ben
here.
Simmons.
Oh, have
That's
I had
the
one of
best
those?
take.
Have I had one of those?
I don't know. We'll get you there at some point.
Oh, don't worry. Detective Mouse Cop is on the scene. He'll find it, I'm sure. All right, we're done on radio. Appreciate you guys until tomorrow. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll continue on Chatterbox YouTube. All right, and we are back off the bench. Chatterbox Sports, just on YouTube right now. I know you said you had an NFL thing.
I was looking on X.com. It is the everything. app.
Everything happens on X.
Everything happens on X.
Number one news source.
Number one,
We
obviously.
are the
We are the news.
We are the media.
Yeah, we are
Yeah.
the media. Yeah.
Together, we.
Thanks, Elliot.
You're welcome. I was looking at this. If you ranked the top 23 pass catchers in the NFL, one is alive in the top 14. 5 of the top 23 pass catchers are still alive in the postseason right now. So this comes into play when we're talking about a guy like T. Higgins. I'd argue there's a lot of exceptions to this rule. If you have a defense, if you have other positions, the Bengals defense just destroyed them. But saying that, do you want to pay T. Higgins $30 million when, just looking at it right now, out of the top 23 pass catchers, 5 are still in the postseason, and only 1 out of the top 14 are still in the playoffs right now. Does that change
Definitely
anything?
a good question.
Because I think this goes back to the running back debate. It goes back to when you talk about should you pay a guy like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, or do you roll with a guy like Chase Brown, who could put up similar production? Obviously, those 3 are in a different universe than Chase Brown is. But you look at Joe Mixon, you look at other running backs in the NFL, and it's like we can replicate that. For receivers, I go back and forth on this because I think if you have Jamar Chase, and obviously I'm proven wrong because obviously the top 4 right now, Jamar Chase, Jefferson, Brian Thomas, Drake London, out of those top 4 pass catchers that were in the league this year, no one's still playing here in the divisional round. Jamar Chase didn't make the playoffs. Brian Thomas and Drake London didn't make the playoffs. So I don't know. I think that the Bengals are a different situation just because the only way this roster is successful, the only way it works is if Joe Burrow is doing what he did last year. That's the only way because the defense just isn't going to be good. I mean, we can say that defense is going to get better, which it will, but it's never going to be a top 10 defense. I have a hard time believing that. All the resources the Bengals have will be put into this offense. So I think if you're a team around the league that has the defense, I don't know if you need to get a top 30 wide receiver. I don't know if you need to pay $30 million because you can replicate it elsewhere.
Maybe these aren't good examples to use because the Bengals and Broncos and Chargers are not even close to being the same type of team, or maybe kind of, I guess, with the Chargers. But like if you look at the Chargers missing the playoffs and just being a bad run organization for a bit, even with the franchise quarterback, they went ahead and they looked at their franchise quarterback. And I thought when you bring in Harbaugh, it's like, man, all right, now you got to go get Herbert weapons. And they did the opposite. They moved on from Keenan Allen. They moved on from all their weapons and said, hey, we're starting completely over on offense. We're going to restructure contracts, and we're going to keep Bosa, and we're going to keep, every weapon we had, Derwin James. We're going to get everyone that we can on defense and just fight. And they obviously focused on defense, and they're in the playoffs a year later with no weapons. You look at the Broncos. Say what you want, obviously, about Jerry Jeudy or whatever, but the same thing. You get a rookie quarterback. Why are you moving on from Jerry Jeudy? Why were you trying to move on from wide receivers? It's because everything was about loading up the defense, and that's what they did. They make the playoffs. And I think, I'm not saying the Bengals need to give up anyone on offense this upcoming offseason, but I also don't think the T. Higgins should be at the top of the priority list, although I understand all the reasons why you guys have kind of laid out why that he should be. I just think when you look at when teams get to this little breaking point of, well, we don't want to start a rebuild, but here's how we restructure some things, it's usually moving on from those expensive pass catchers and those weapons on offense and money being better well spent on defense. But then that little caveat of the way the freaking Bengals operate, that throws a wrench in everything, because you would like to say, okay, move on from T. Higgins and just go spend a bunch of money on defense. But you guys don't trust that they'll do that.
Right.
Don't trust that they're going to be able to draft anybody. The Rams, we didn't even talk about them today. I just saw something. I mean, they listed like 8 draft picks in the last 2 years that are all starters on this team, and they're swarming around and getting stops last night and just hitting people, popping people in the mouth. And then you have Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp, which is as similar to an offense as I could see with Cincinnati having a two-headed monster, the pass catchers with Joe Burrow. The Bengals should be the Rams of the AFC, and it's really this offseason for them to figure that out if they want to go that route. But it starts with the draft.
Yeah.
Because talking about money, it starts with the draft, because if you spend money and don't draft well, you're going nowhere.
Agreed.
And if you draft well and don't spend money, you're kind of running in place, and then you look like the Chargers. So I'm curious what they do.
Statistically, Elliot, you're obviously right. You have the numbers. But looking at the teams that are left, Amon-Ra St. Brown, elite receiver. Sam Laporta, elite tight end. That's 2 elite options in Detroit. The Commanders obviously struggling, but I would still even put Terry McLaurin near that category of elite receivers. Philly has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. The Rams have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. The Bills traded for Amari Cooper in the middle of the season and spent their first-round pick on Keon Coleman. Mm-hmm. The Ravens have a first-round pick in Rashad Bateman and a first-round pick in Zay Flowers. The Chiefs, obviously Kelsey, but we've talked about their receiving core a lot. They've used big draft capital on a lot of those guys. And then the Texans, obviously the injuries, but Tank Dell was drafted high. Nico Collins is elite. And then they went out and signed Stephon Diggs this offseason. So statistically, maybe it doesn't translate to leading this season with the way injuries affected a lot of those players and a lot of these teams. But of all the teams remaining, they all have elite pass catchers, and the vast majority have multiple. So even though the stats might not, lead you to believe that you absolutely need a dominant pass catcher, I think it proves, at least down the stretch, you don't need him to play well in the regular season, but you need him to win in the wild card and divisional round for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bengals, by the way, who's their comp in the league? Who's the team? Is it the Rams, like I said, the NFC? Who's the team that you look at and say, yeah, the Bengals they're more built like this? I mean, Philly drafts so much better than the Bengals that I don't think it's fair to compare. But the Rams are kind of doing that too.
The Rams started 1-4 this year. One out, won their division. Like, it's the same slow start stuff the Bengals have dealt with, and the Rams just find a way out of it, and the Bengals haven't.
Bad
and that's
defensive
because
numbers.
they draft.
Yeah. Bad defensive numbers too, by the way. And I think it averaged out. I think you could look at the season as a whole and highlight how bad the defense is. But if I saw a split screen defensive breakdown of the Rams, like they were a top 12 defensive team the final 8 games of the regular season, and then they were obviously bottom 5 for the start of the season. I think that leads to what you're talking about, that 1-4 start. But yeah, I don't follow the Rams full roster to know did they miss some pieces early and get pieces back, or what adjustments they made. But when I look at that firepower, I was watching some of that game last night, and I'm like, yeah, there's not another team, maybe the Eagles, but I don't think you're getting the quarterback contribution at the level of some of the other teams out of Jalen Hurts. But Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and then, of course, Williams, the running back. So it's just like I think the Rams are pretty dangerous. We said that the other day, the sleeper team out of the NFC.
Yeah.
It's easily the Rams.
They're fun to watch. And Stafford's playing this well. It's going to be hard to beat them. Man, we go through the NFC quarterbacks, and I mean, I know Jaden Daniels is playing great so far this year, and we can say whatever about how good Jared Goff has been in his time in Detroit, but I mean, I would take Matthew Stafford comfortably over the other 3 remaining quarterbacks in the NFC if I had a game on the line and I had to rely on one guy. He's already done it. He's been there. He's won. I think it's really cool how the narrative has changed around him as well. I mean, we hear it with a bunch of young quarterbacks nowadays that they can't win, they can't get over the hump, all that stuff that we, bang on these elite players because they don't have playoff success. Well, Matthew Stafford didn't for a long, long time. And then he goes to L.A., wins the Super Bowl, and now he's talked about as a first ballot, potentially Hall of Famer. So I think it's a little interesting, especially with Stafford, how fickle some of these, takes and things about players are. Because I know a Super Bowl is a big change, but, just one ring, and all the numbers are the same. But just one ring, and all of a sudden this guy's a Hall of Famer. And I just think that's a little crazy.
How about the Vikings and Rams, though? They've had weird crossovers this season. I think they played the final week of the trade deadline. And so they played that Monday Night Football game before the trade deadline. And had the Rams lost that, there was talks of the Rams or of the Vikings, even with Sam Darnold playing well. Sam Darnold started out hot. They were like 5-0, and then they went 5-2 heading into that trade deadline. He was kind of playing a little iffy, and they said, well, if the Rams win that game against or if the Vikings would have beat the Rams would have been open to trading Cooper Kupp. Remember back during that time, would the Bengals even entertain the idea of adding Cooper? I mean, remember how silly we sounded? That was so long ago. That was probably the dumbest thing ever said on this show, easily, right? All in favor, say hi. Hi? No? Okay. But no, so had the Vikings beat the Rams, Matthew Stafford could have easily been the quarterback in Minnesota. Cooper Kupp could have been, a Pittsburgh Steeler because they were trying so hard to get a wide receiver. But then the Rams end up winning, and then the Rams win again last night on Monday Night Football. But I don't know. How far do you see the Rams going?
I could see the Rams. I really could see the Rams. I mean, I know it would be crazy. I could see them going to the Super Bowl. I think
6 points is absurd.
I agree.
Absurd.
I agree. So I think that they're good enough. I really do. I think that they have a good enough offense where, especially with Kyren Williams, who's a star, that if you're able to get a little bit of a lead and you just run it with Kyren, I think the game's over. I think you saw it last night. Once you get into that hole the Vikings got in, it's impossible to climb out of. It's just impossible. It's forcing you to throw. It's forcing you to make mistakes. And I think the Rams' defense, though, isn't great. I do think that they're going to be serviceable against, some of these other offenses in the NFC that are left. The Lions, I love the Lions. Love them. By the way, feel free to bet David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs anytime touchdown score at minus 400 each.
What?
Minus 400, both of them. But
sorry?
Oh, yeah. I do think the Lions have lost so much defensively that I wouldn't be shocked if they were to lose. I do believe that. I think the Eagles, again, have a great defense. They've got a great offensive line. There's just something that's wrong with that offense.
Imagine the North dominating all year just to get to their all their one playoff games and done.
It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me at all. The Eagles' offense is I don't trust it. I really don't. I think Saquon's great, but Jalen Hurts looked a little bit rusty in that game. I don't know what the hell the drama is on that team when your star wide receiver is reading books on the sideline. So it wouldn't shock me if the Eagles got bounced and Nick Sirianni.
That's weird, right?
That's very weird.
Yeah, so yesterday, weird.
It's strange.
Kevin and I debated this on the show yesterday. I was like, I don't want to make something small, make it a big deal, but what I don't like is when athletes do weird stuff like that, and then in the post game press conference do the whole, you guys are just making something out of nothing, or
he said he reads it every game.
Yeah, and I'm like,
no, you don't.
Still weird.
I don't think you do.
No, you don't.
I don't think you do.
There's cameras on you at every game.
Trust me, people will go back and find everything that you say and do if you're not careful. I know this, and I'm not on the same scale as him. Just saying.
If you had to pick between the Rams, the Commanders, the Eagles, and the Lions, I know the Rams are probably at least third amongst a lot of people's opinions. I just think they're capable of getting to a Super Bowl. I really do. Given what's happened to the rest of those teams, I just think there's something wrong with each of them. And if you can get past their flaws, there's no reason I don't see you getting there.
My worry about the Rams is earlier this year the Eagles went to LA and played the Rams.
They did
and
destroy.
Derrick Henry had Saquon Barkley had 26 carries for 255 yards.
Long time ago, though. That was a long time ago.
Not really. It was week 11.
It was a long time ago.
It was back half of the year.
October.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like this. If Saquon just runs it down your throat, who cares how good Matthew Stafford is? You don't touch the ball.
Do you think the Eagles look good against the Packers, though? Because I don't think they. I think if you take away, I mean, Jordan Love made some of the worst mistakes I've ever seen.
Looked like he played a team with their top 3 receivers
I
all
don't
being
think
out.
the Eagles looked bad.
And I'd argue outside of a terrible call that happened in the first 3 seconds of that game.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right.
I don't think they look good. And if it comes down to Jake Elliott making kicks, good luck.
I also just hate Kellen Moore. Such bad play calling.
Yeah.
He's going to be the Cowboys head coach if Jerry
Almost
can't figure
certainly.
it out. If Dion doesn't bail him out, you're going to go Robert Salah? You're going to go? Where are you going to go? I mean, I think it's going to be Kellen Moore. And
Does he wait until middle of June and bring in Bill for $1 million? When that buyout falls off, you just go through all the draft process and everything, just Jerry pulling the strings?
If I'm Jerry, I would. Why wouldn't you? You get a really good head coach. You're both really old. You're both trying to win right now.
You're both dating much younger people. But real quick.
Isn't Jerry married?
I don't think that matters when you're a celebrity, does it?
He's Jerry.
Okay. Well,
Hey, you brought up a good point. You were pissed at how the Cowboys handled McCarthy's coaching search. Remember,
I thought that was a little bit interesting and moderately disgusting. You have like to think you knew you weren't going to bring Mike McCarthy back. It certainly seemed like the holdup was about years, but it doesn't sound like they gave Mike McCarthy a real offer for a Super Bowl winning coach that has won every regular season basically until this year. He's had a winning record. So, to block his interview, to go interview elsewhere when you don't have the intention of bringing him back, I thought that was absurd and a little bit crazy. And I feel like there should be some repercussions for the Cowboys for that. If you're not going to bring a guy back, let him interview elsewhere. Let him figure out where he could be wanted. Let him try to get a job. I just don't understand even at all how that is acceptable or part of the NFL model.
Do you think that once he found out he was trying to get interviews, that's when he got mad?
But then why would you block it?
I don't know, but I'm trying to
Spite.
understand the reasoning.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm trying to understand the reasoning behind it, and the only way that it makes sense to me is Jerry was locked in with Mike, and he thought Mike was locked in with him. And when Mike started fielding other interviews, he's like, all right, you want to leave? Well, now you can't, and you're gone. So
the ego got kicked.
So I thought it was just a vindictive move. And I think Jacob's right. I think there should be some sort of sanctions placed on the Cowboys because that's just a low ball move.
So like I said, Dion, that's the home run hire if they could do that because that saves the face for the Cowboys.
Home run for who?
It's
home
a
run
for
for
Jerry.
Dion.
It's a home run for Jerry up front because then he doesn't look as weird for this.
I can get behind that.
But you can make the argument too. By the way, I did read today that if this idea that the Cowboys, if you get Dion to be the head coach and you trade away Dak Prescott, you have to eat $107 million dead cap next year and you can't pay out. There's no way to maneuver that to be able to spread it out over a couple seasons. That would all be on next year's, against next year's salary cap. So that would be a brutal way to get out. Kellen Moore is probably the better hire. It's not flashy.
You're
I don't like
out
Kellen
these
Moore
words like better and win and every name we've said so far I think would just be such an abysmal hire.
Well, because what they'll do is they'll play on everyone's emotions and say, man, I do feel like we're real ESPN right now, all this Cowboys talk. Bring up the fact that, Dak Prescott had great years when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator, and now we got to bring him back to save the day and blah, blah, blah. Like, it'll be one of those.
Oh, they'll try to sell it. But, I don't know. I think they put themselves in a pretty bad situation right now. And also, how desirable is that job? You got to work under Jerry. Granted, you probably have the longest leash of anywhere in the NFL, maybe Cincinnati. But, there's a huge leash to get it figured out.
Pittsburgh seems to be pretty patient.
Pittsburgh, for sure. But how desirable is that job? Unless you have the utmost belief in Dak and CeeDee Lamb and think you can get Micah Parsons re-signed, once you do all that, then you're in cap hell. And you have to fix a lot of other things. And your coordinators are bad and old and leaving. And I just don't know how desirable that Cowboys job is. We see Cowboys, we see a head coaching opening, and we automatically think, push it to the front of the line. I just don't know if that's the case anymore. For a guy like Dion, a guy that played there, a guy who cares about his social image as much as Dion does, and I'm not even saying that as a shot or a bad thing. Going to a place like Dallas would mean something to a guy like Dion.
Actually, I think it makes sense for Dion.
Right.
Because I don't think he knows how to coach.
Okay.
So if you go to somewhere, like, for one, he won when he went to Jackson State because you got literally D1 players to go play there for you. So, of course, you were going to beat up on those schools. They lost, by the way. They didn't even win that dang thing, didn't they?
I think they lost.
They lost. So then when those players were going to go on to D1, instead of him proving that he can coach through another cycle of players coming through, he takes the Colorado job, knowing that if I lose year 1 and year 2, it's okay, we're supposed to. But knowing if I win, it won't be at the level of what everyone wants me to. But, hey, look at the turnaround. That's the BS spin I heard on that. Colorado, look at the miracle turnaround of Colorado. Stop it. I watched Cignetti go to Indiana and lead them to the playoff. Don't sit there and tell me that what Deion did at Colorado was more impressive than that. It was not. So now with Shedeur and Travis Hunter gone, now he has the chance to go out there and prove that he can coach, or he can go to Dallas, that's a disaster, and have a couple-year built-in excuses to lose. Quarterback on an expensive contract, not a good salary cap situation, the team's not very good, meddling owner. Dallas is a perfect spot for Deion because he doesn't have to succeed there because he will have all these excuses around him. He just gets to be likable. I think Dallas is perfect for Deion. And by the way, do I know if he can coach or not? I hope he can. I want Deion to be like a big star coach in football.
Fun.
But I do think he knows when to move, and I think he knows how to kind of hide behind some of the deficiencies of his teams to use his excuses, because we've yet to see Colorado have playoff or championship expectations, right? We have yet to see him coach a team that has those expectations. And when they would start winning, guess what? That's when they would crap the bed every single time. Dallas is perfect for him. Go there. You're not expected to actually win. Just be a star. Be a celebrity.
I just think Jerry would want somebody that can bend the knee. That's somebody that's just going to roll over and be pet by Jerry. And
Deion has bad knees too.
I just don't think Deion fits that. I don't think Deion fits that. I think Deion's his own guy. That's why many people like him. That's why I like him. I think he follows the beat of his own drum, and I don't think Jerry wants that type of guy. I think he wants a Mike McCarthy. He wants somebody that can just roll over, a Kellen Moore, a Jason Garrett. That's who Jerry is, and that's who he wants.
Jason Garrett, current leader in the clubhouse on NBC Sunday Night Football pregame show Pick'em. So maybe he knows what's going on, the ins and outs of the league. Maybe Jerry goes back and gets Jason Garrett. That would be a doozy.
Would be a hell of a move.
Well, Jason might be the guy, but not Garrett. Jason Witten keeps getting brought up.
Oh man, now that's
That's a Jerry hire right
Big
there.
Wit.
He was an awesome announcer, so we should definitely give him an opportunity somewhere else in the football landscape.
Before we end today's show, we did have a super chat today. Justin
do?
likes giving us some super chats. Thank you, Justin. $1.99. Ohio State fan base is the worst in all of sports.
Thanks, Justin.
We're not great.
Justin paid $2
We're not
for
great.
that one.
What did we do? What did the fan base do though this time?
I think that was just during when we were talking about it earlier on. I'm not sure what they did.
That's
Just
fair.
in general.
I think that was just in general.
Oh,
When people say that to me, like, I never get mad because I'm like, I agree.
yeah, we suck.
The Ohio State fans are the worst.
They're
They're the most passionate about their team.
Yeah.
Alabama fans are passionate. LSU, everyone has Notre Dame, but like, yes, obnoxious. Like I was annoyed with this when I went to the Rose Bowl. It was annoying, and I loved it, but it was annoying. Like, I get it. Like, no argument here.
Colin brings up a good point. I could see Ryan Day in Dallas. I think that's a perfect candidate. He would just go there. He would listen to what Daddy Jerry has to say, and together they'd have zero playoff.
You mean
wins.
Kellen Moore with facial hair? Would
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. What if Ryan Day wins a national title and then just says, "All right, I'm out. I did what I was supposed to."
I hope he does. I honest to God hope he does. I think that would be probably. I mean, I don't know where Ohio State fans are now, but if he wins a championship, I assume the angry mob goes away for quite some time.
Well, you know exactly how long it goes away till.
It goes away till sometime in November.
The last weekend of November.
Sometime in November. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with Ryan. I think he should. I think if he wins a championship, he should bounce. We'll see how good the Ohio State program is when I leave.
For every Michigan loss he also has a playoff win. So
That's true.
just saying, they go hand in hand.
We're losing our argument points left and right here. He was 2-6 against top 5 teams going into this year. He's 7-6 if he wins this championship.
Damn.
I did not pick Ohio State to make it this far because the whole narrative for Ryan Day for his entire run has been not being able to beat good teams, but I'm supposed to buy in to him being able to beat 4 straight good teams in 1 month. I don't know, but he's done a good job with that. Tomorrow's show, I'm here to tell you, your guy Caleb Williams, I would not mind seeing Mike McCarthy in all Chicago.
I'd be pretty happy.
I think right now with the options that are left, I think it's actually not the worst.
I've been active on the stock markets lately. I've scooped up a lot of late season Caleb Williams stock.
Okay.
I'm heavily leveraging myself there.
Okay.
I'm scooping up a lot of Herbert right now. A lot of people are selling their Justin Herbert stock. I'm getting in
Mine's
there.
gone.
Mine now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, I'm selling high on a couple guys. I sold late on Darnold. Lost some there, but I'm getting in on a lot of these young quarterbacks right now. I think people are turning off a little quickly.
I'm going to keep defending Herbert. If Herbert had, and this is not me discrediting Burrow's success, but Burrow's success, I'm not saying comes easy, but it comes a lot easier when you have T and Jamar and you have those types of weapons. Quentin Johnson, I mean, I'm just not a fan of the weapons. Now, I do like the kid that had 197 yards. That kid is kind of working against me a tad, but like he's not working with the weapons that all these other elite quarterbacks are.
Now,
it's hard to defend you, though.
pushback.
4 interceptions, though. It's like, good Lord, dude. What are we doing?
Slight pushback. Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, best tackle duo in the league, number 3 overall defense. You can't have it all.
Can't have
Joe
it.
Burrow has a bad O-line and a bad defense and elite weapons. Justin Herbert has 2 of the 3 elite and an elite head coach.
I've seen Joe Burrow make it to a Super Bowl with a bad O-line. I said during
That's
that
right.
time, I was like, you never get to use that as an excuse again.
Okay,
Now that's
fair.
the expectations.
Fair. There was a rankings put out just right before we wrap up. There was a rankings put out about NFL quarterbacks, and Tier 1 was Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Tier 2 was just Joe Burrow. Tier 1 was listed as quarterbacks that can drag any team to a Super Bowl.
I saw
and
this.
Tier 2 was
I saw this.
slightly worse playmaker. Now my argument there,
I saw this.
my argument there would be the guy who's not in the drag any team to a Super Bowl tier has dragged a team to a Super Bowl.
I would
And
switch him
Lamar
and Josh Allen.
and Josh Allen have not.
I would keep Lamar. That reasoning is dumb for how they have that.
You
broken
can't
down.
label them like that.
I would switch out Joe and Lamar, or Joe and Allen. I think you have to put Lamar there because the 2 MVPs, possibly
Yeah.
3. Joe Burrow doesn't have that MVP,
Can we just
but
say all 4 are really, really good, guys?
it's not how it works.
I don't know why you got to separate them. You don't got to. I think those 4 are in a tier of their own. By
If
far.
Josh Allen wins an MVP this year, I will not allow you guys to separate it. Because then those are 3 guys who are killing it up in all the regular season awards.
But if Josh or Lamar don't get to a Super Bowl this year, we still have that.
But I think Lamar's safe because the 2 MVPs, possibly 3. Josh Allen and Burrow are tied right now until one of them wins an MVP. Well, no, because then you got to give Joe Burrow the slight edge because of the Super Bowl
And
appearance.
if
I see.
Lamar
Okay.
or Josh still can't beat Patrick, I think that matters too.
Well, Josh recently
In
beat
the regular,
Patrick.
he always beats him in the regular season.
It's when it counts.
That's right. That's right.
That's Joe Burrow's time to shine, baby.
That's right. That's right.
No, all right, good stuff. Tomorrow, we'll figure out tomorrow. Until
That's
tomorrow.
the fun thing about tomorrow is it's not happening right
Got
now.
plenty of time. All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. Until tomorrow, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.